My name is Adrian. I'm 27, and if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said my family wasn't perfect, but they were at least dependable. You know, the kind of family that might argue over holidays or whisper little criticisms behind your back, but when something truly serious happened, they'd show up. I believed that until the night I was rushed into surgery and realized how wrong I was. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. I'd been feeling off for a while, dull stomach pains that I brushed off as stress or maybe bad takeout. I worked long hours, didn't always sleep enough, and figured my body was just reminding me I wasn't invincible. That night, though, the pain hit like a truck. It doubled me over in my tiny apartment kitchen, sharp enough that I couldn't even stand. I called for an ambulance, more panicked than I've ever been in my life, clutching my stomach while I tried to remember to breathe. The last thing I thought before the EMTs loaded me into the back was, at least Mom and Dad will come. At least I won't be alone. Surgery wasn't optional. The doctors explained something about an obstruction and internal bleeding, words that blurred together under the haze of morphine. I was terrified, but I held on to the idea that my family would be waiting for me when I came out. My parents, my sister, maybe even a cousin or two, they'd drop everything. I mean, who wouldn't, right? When your kid, your sibling, your blood is rushed into surgery, you go. Except they didn't. When I woke up hours later in the recovery room, groggy and dry-mouthed, the first thing I reached for was my phone. Not a single missed call before surgery. Not a single text asking if I was okay. My chest tightened, not from the stitches, but from this heavy, sinking realization. I scrolled again, half convinced I was too drugged to see properly. Nothing. Just silence. It wasn't until the next morning that the flood began. My phone buzzed nonstop. 89 missed calls, mostly from my mom, and one long text that simply read, "We need to talk. Urgently. Urgently." As if she'd been wringing her hands all night, worried sick. But where had she been when I was on that operating table? Where had anyone been? I pieced it together slowly through social media. While I was under anesthesia, my entire family, parents, sister, aunts, uncles, even my grandparents, had been at my cousin Damien's birthday party. There were photos of them laughing around a cake, drinks in hand, balloons everywhere. My dad had his arm around Damien in one of them, holding up a glass like he was the proudest man alive. My mom had even commented on one of the pictures, "Family first, always." Family first. The words hit me like ice water. I remember lying there in the hospital bed, stitches pulling with every movement, staring at those photos. My phone beeped softly beside me. I wasn't crying, not exactly. It was something worse. A kind of numbness that settled in my chest, like a door closing. They hadn't even checked in until after the party was over, and even then, it wasn't concern that filled their messages. It was guilt, poorly disguised as urgency. The nurse came in around noon with a small smile, asking if anyone was coming to see me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My family hadn't shown. Not one. She gave me this gentle look, like she understood more than I said, and told me not to worry, that some people just didn't know how to handle emergencies. But I knew better. They hadn't come because they chose not to. They had decided Damien's birthday was more important than me being cut open on a table. That was the first time I let myself replay all the little things I'd brushed off for years. The time my parents left me stranded after prom because my sister wanted to go to a party instead. The way my achievements, graduating, getting my first job, were always overshadowed by Damien's endless accomplishments. How my mom once told me flat out, "You'll never shine the way he does, but that's okay. You don't need to." I'd swallowed that down, telling myself I was overthinking, that I just needed to toughen up. But now, lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I wasn't a priority to them. I never had been. And yet, that flood of missed calls and messages kept coming. By the time I was strong enough to sit up, my phone was full of desperate little pleas. "Call us back, Adrian. This isn't how family works. Don't be dramatic. We love you." The audacity of it made my hands shake. They hadn't come when it mattered. They hadn't even sent flowers. But now they wanted to talk, urgently, as if I owed them something. That was the moment the anger started to bloom, hot and steady, under the numbness. I didn't know it then, but that anger would carry me through the weeks that followed. It would sharpen into something colder, more deliberate. Because if they thought they could abandon me in my most vulnerable moment and then sweep it under the rug with a few frantic messages, they were sorely mistaken. And the funny thing? They had no idea what was coming. I didn't respond to any of their messages for the first few days. I lay in that sterile hospital room, eating bland soup and jello, scrolling through their social media updates. While I sat with stitches running across my abdomen, struggling to walk to the bathroom without wincing, my parents were posting photos of the best family night ever with Damien and his friends. My sister even wrote a caption under one picture. "We always show up for each other. That's what family means." I nearly dropped my phone when I read it. Show up for each other? I was in the hospital bed, stitched up like a broken toy, and apparently I didn't count. The hospital discharged me a week later. No one came to pick me up. The nurse wheeled me to the entrance, where I awkwardly climbed into an Uber, clutching my bag against the tug of stitches. As we pulled out of the hospital, I wondered if maybe I'd walk into my apartment and find flowers on the counter or food left in the fridge. But there was nothing, no note, no gesture, just the same silence that had followed me all week. 2 days after I got home, Mom finally showed up unannounced. I heard the key twist in the lock. She still had a spare from when I moved in years ago. The door swung open and there she was, holding a grocery bag of fruit, as if that erased everything. She looked me up and down, her eyes darting to the healing line under my shirt. "Adrian," she said, with this sigh that sounded more inconvenienced than concerned. "You should have told us how serious it was. We thought it was something minor. Do you know how guilty we all feel?" I stared at her. I was rushed into emergency surgery. How much more serious could it be? She waved her hand like I was exaggerating. "Honey, we had already promised Damien we'd be there for his birthday. You know how important that was to him. We didn't want him to feel abandoned on his big day." That word, abandoned, made my jaw tighten. I wanted to laugh, but the pain in my stomach wouldn't let me. "So you abandoned me instead?" She frowned, setting the fruit on the counter as if to change the subject. "You're being harsh. We've always done our best for you. But Damien, he needs us. You know how fragile he is. You're strong. You can handle things on your own." Strong. That word had always been their excuse. When my sister needed tuition help, they scrambled to cover it, calling her delicate. When Damien crashed his car last year, they rallied around him, saying he was going through a tough time. But me? I was always strong, which really meant we don't have to try. I didn't say much after that. I just nodded, let her ramble about how much family unity mattered, and then watched her leave like nothing had happened. A few days later, the call started again. This time it was my dad. His tone was less apologetic, more commanding. "Adrian, you need to stop making this into a big deal. Everyone is upset you're ignoring them. Damien especially. He thinks you're holding a grudge over nothing. He said he tried to call you the night of the surgery, but you didn't pick up." I gripped the phone tighter. "I was under anesthesia, Dad." He chuckled like I'd made a joke. "Still, you could have texted before going in, just to let everyone know it was life or death. Otherwise, how were we supposed to know?" That was the moment I realized this wasn't guilt. It was damage control. They weren't sorry for missing my surgery. They were sorry I wasn't playing along with the story they wanted to tell. The next family gathering drove that point home. They insisted I come, saying it would heal the rift. Against my better judgment, I went. I wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, they'd acknowledge what happened. But the second I walked in, Damien was front and center, bragging about how everyone came together for his birthday. "Best night of my life," he said, clapping my dad on the shoulder. "Family always has my back." I stood there, quiet, while my mom passed me a plate like I was a guest instead of her son. Nobody asked about my recovery. Nobody mentioned the hospital. Instead, my aunt leaned over and whispered, "Don't sulk, Adrian. It was just bad timing." Damien's party was planned months in advance. I swallowed every bitter word I wanted to say and sat there, nodding politely, like I hadn't almost died alone while they ate cake. But inside, something was shifting. The anger that had started in that hospital bed was hardening into something else, a determination, a cold clarity. Because if they couldn't see what they'd done, if they really thought I was just going to forget it, then they had no idea who I really was. And sooner or later, they were going to find out. 2 weeks after that family gathering, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could start to put some distance between myself and the whole ordeal. My stitches were healing. I was able to walk around without wincing too much, and I was finally back at work part-time. I figured if I kept my head down and focused on myself, the storm would pass. But then came the betrayal that made everything crystal clear. There was no moving on, not with them. It started on a Wednesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, still in my uniform, when my phone buzzed with a notification. It wasn't a call or a text, it was a bank alert. Unusual activity detected. My stomach dropped. I opened the app, and sure enough, over $4,000 had been withdrawn in a single day. Plane tickets, hotel reservations, luxury restaurant charges. All booked under Damien's name. At first, I thought it had to be fraud. I mean, no one in their right mind would use my card without asking, right? But then I remembered, my mom still had my spare card. The one I'd given her years ago when I moved out, in case of emergencies. I'd never asked for it back because I figured she'd never use it without telling me. My chest tightened as the reality sank in. They had gone into my account, without permission, while I was still recovering. I called Mom immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice casual, like nothing was wrong. "Oh good, you're finally calling us back. I was starting to think you'd cut us off completely. Why is Damien using my card?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Oh, Adrian, don't make such a fuss. Damien had an opportunity to travel with some friends, and his account was overdrawn. We thought you wouldn't mind helping out for family. You've always been so independent." My grip on the phone tightened. Helping out? $4,000 is not helping out. You stole from me. She gasped, like I had insulted her. "Don't say it like that. We were going to tell you eventually. You make enough to spare, and Damien really needed this. It's his last chance to go on this kind of trip before he settles down. You wouldn't understand." My throat went dry. I was in the hospital a week ago, alone, and you thought it was fine to drain my account so Damien could party. Her voice hardened, that sharp tone I remembered from childhood when she wanted me to feel ashamed. "Adrian, don't twist this. You should be grateful we trust you enough to contribute when the family needs it. Damien has always been there for us. It's time you learn to do the same." I hung up before I could say something I'd regret, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. But the betrayal didn't stop there. That weekend, I got another notification. My father had transferred money from the joint emergency account we'd set up years ago, just in case something happened to them. He and my mom had promised never to touch it without consulting me. And yet, half of it was gone. When I confronted him, he brushed it off with the same line. "Family first. You're strong enough to rebuild." It wasn't just the money. It was the principle. They had left me to face surgery alone, then turned around and treated me like a walking wallet, as if my survival had no value except for what I could provide to Damien's comfort. The final straw came at Sunday dinner. I hadn't planned to go, but my sister texted that it's time you stop sulking. Against my better judgment, I went, telling myself I'd get answers face to face. The table was loud with chatter when I walked in. Damien sat at the head, grinning as he scrolled through photos from his trip, photos that my money had paid for. He waved his phone around, showing off fancy meals, a yacht, laughing friends. Man, this was the best week of my life. Couldn't have done it without family. He looked straight at me when he said it. Everyone clapped and cheered like he had achieved something incredible. My mother even added, "See, Adrian, this is what family sacrifice is about. We all help each other." I stared at them, my fork frozen in my hand. Not one word about my surgery. Not one word about the fact that they had stolen from me. Just applause for Damien, who had turned my money into his victory lap. That was the moment something inside me broke. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was clarity. They weren't going to change. They had chosen their golden boy, and I was nothing but a convenient afterthought, someone to use when it suited them. I smiled tightly through dinner, nodding at their empty words, but inside, I made a promise to myself. If they thought I was going to keep playing this role, the strong one, the disposable one, they were in for a surprise. And that was the night I began quietly planning. After that dinner, I left my parents' house with a hollow feeling in my chest. I remember the sound of their laughter echoing behind me as I closed the door, a sound that used to feel comforting, but now felt like knives pressed against my ribs. It was the sound of a family united, but not with me, against me. The Uber ride back to my apartment was silent except for the dull hum of the engine. I stared out the window at the blur of streetlights, my reflection faint in the glass. I barely recognized myself. My body still hurt every time I moved too quickly, and my finances, already stretched thin from medical bills, had been gutted by my own family. Worse than the physical pain or the money, though, was the loneliness. I had always believed, deep down, that even if they didn't understand me, my parents loved me. That belief had been the last thread tying me to them, and it had finally snapped. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My body healed slowly, but emotionally, I was crumbling. At work, I kept my head down, forcing a smile for customers while my inside screamed. At home, I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every betrayal. My father's chuckle on the phone when I confronted him about the stolen money. Damien's smug grin as he bragged about his trip. My mother's sharp tone when she scolded me for being ungrateful. I realized I hadn't just been abandoned during my surgery. They had abandoned me long before that. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Bills started piling up faster than I could keep up. My savings, which had taken years to build, were drained. When the credit card statements rolled in, I felt sick. The charges weren't mine, but legally, the debt was. I contacted the bank, explained what had happened, even filed a fraud claim, but the investigation was slow, and in the meantime, collectors wanted their money. I had to pick up extra shifts just to stay afloat, all while my body screamed at me for pushing too hard, too soon after surgery. There was one night that sticks out in particular. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment because I couldn't afford a proper couch yet. Most of my savings had gone into trying to build a future, one step at a time. I was eating instant noodles, my stitches aching, when my phone buzzed. It was Damien. A photo. Him in front of a casino, holding a stack of chips, captioned, "Living the dream. My money. My sacrifices." His dream. I didn't reply. I just set the phone down and stared at the noodles until they went cold. That was my rock bottom. The realization that no matter how much I gave, they would keep taking until there was nothing left. And yet, in that pit of despair, something small began to stir. A seed of resolve. If they thought I was weak, if they thought I was too strong to need help but not strong enough to fight back, they were wrong. I started to think about the details they never paid attention to. The spare key my mom still had. The accounts my dad thought I didn't know about. The little secrets Damien bragged about when he'd had too much to drink. I started writing things down, piecing together patterns, keeping receipts, literal and figurative. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to keep being their scapegoat, their wallet, or their forgotten son. I was going to bide my time, gather my strength, and when the moment came, I would make them see me, not as the strong one they could lean on, but as someone they never should have underestimated. And so I smiled through my pain, nodded through their guilt-ridden texts, and played the part they expected. But inside, in the quiet, I was already walking away from them. Step by step. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first, it was small, almost invisible. I started by reclaiming what was mine. I called the bank again, this time refusing to back down when they gave me the same scripted responses about processing times. I asked to speak to supervisors, filed complaints, and sent every piece of documentation I had. I kept a binder filled with evidence, statements, screenshots of Damien's posts, records of the withdrawals. I learned quickly that persistence was its own kind of weapon, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a sliver of control. At work, things began to change too. My manager noticed how I handled the extra shifts without complaint, even when I was clearly tired. Instead of pity, she offered me an opportunity, training for a supervisory role. The raise wasn't massive, but it was enough to remind me that I didn't have to depend on anyone else. Each paycheck that went directly toward repairing the damage felt like another stone laid in the foundation of my independence. Slowly, the financial hole began to close. I cut out everything unnecessary, lived simply, and poured every spare dollar into rebuilding. It was grueling, but it was also freeing. I realized that the less I needed from my family, the less power they had over me. Every time I watched the balance in my account grow, I felt a sense of strength they could never take. And beyond money, something deeper was shifting. My phone would buzz with their calls, their guilt-laced messages, but I stopped responding. The silence gave me room to breathe, and in that quiet, I rediscovered parts of myself I hadn't paid attention to in years. I started running in the mornings, just short distances at first, then longer as my body healed. I read books I'd always put off. I joined a small local group for young professionals, something I would have been too nervous to try before, and found myself surrounded by people who actually listened when I spoke. The more I invested in myself, the more their absence stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like relief. I no longer had to brace myself for their manipulations, their favoritism, or the endless comparisons to Damien. I wasn't the strong one anymore. I was simply myself, and that was enough. Then, an opportunity came that changed everything. A colleague introduced me to someone starting a new business venture, and they needed someone organized, persistent, and detail-oriented to help manage operations. I hesitated at first. I was still clawing my way out of debt, but something inside told me to take the leap. I did. It was hard work, the kind that left me exhausted but fulfilled. For the first time, my efforts weren't being overshadowed by someone else's needs or dismissed as expected. I was recognized, valued. Within 6 months, the venture was turning a profit, and I was holding equity in something that had real potential. My name was on the paperwork, my contributions were acknowledged, and the financial stability I'd lost was returning faster than I'd dared to hope. Meanwhile, my family still thought I was barely scraping by. The few times I ran into them, they made snide comments about me, working too much, or living small. Damien, especially, would smirk and say things like, "Not everyone is cut out for the big life. Huh, cousin?" I smiled, nodded, and let him believe it. Because the less they knew, the more power I had. By the end of that year, I was stronger, financially, emotionally, and mentally, than I had ever been. I had carved out a life without them, one brick at a time, and with every step forward, I felt the weight of their betrayal lifting. But here's the thing. Just because I was moving on didn't mean I'd forgotten. No, the anger that had burned in me that night at dinner had never gone out. It had simply transformed. From raw pain into something sharper, steadier. Patience. And when the moment came, and I knew it would, I'd be ready. It was almost eerie how naturally the pieces started falling into place, like fate was nudging me towards something I hadn't dared to envision before. By the time a year had passed since my surgery, my life looked nothing like the hollow, desperate months that followed my discharge. I was thriving, still modest by most standards, but for me, it felt like climbing out of a pit and standing on solid ground for the first time. And that's when the information, the leverage I hadn't even been searching for, began to reveal itself. It started with Damien, of course. He'd always been the loud one, the showboat, bragging about deals he had in the works, money he didn't actually have, women he thought adored him. At a mutual acquaintances get-together, someone from high school I hadn't seen in years, Damien's name came up. Apparently, he had been boasting about a startup investment he was running, promising insane returns if people bought in. My acquaintance rolled his eyes and muttered, "It's basically a pyramid scheme. Half the guys who gave him money are already asking questions." I didn't react, just listened, nodding casually. But inside, my mind was racing. If Damien was scamming people, it wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was dangerous. And if it came crashing down, which it would, my family's blind support for him would turn into their biggest liability. The second piece of leverage came from my father. I was digging through some old files one evening, organizing my documents now that I was taking better care of my finances, when I stumbled across paperwork from the emergency fund account he had raided. Buried in the fine print was a detail I hadn't noticed before. My name wasn't just on the account. I had full legal rights to review, withdraw, and audit it. And as I started going over the statements, I saw patterns. Money moved around, withdrawn in odd amounts, sometimes deposited into what looked like my parents' personal ventures. That night, I realized something crucial. They weren't just careless with my trust. They were careless with their own paper trail. If I wanted to, I could map out exactly where every dollar had gone, and more importantly, when. The final piece came, oddly enough, from my mother. She called one afternoon, the kind of call I almost ignored out of habit. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. Her tone was sugar-sweet, but beneath it, I caught the strain. "Adrian, dear, you should come to the reunion this year. Everyone will be there. Damien especially. He wants to share his success with the whole family. You wouldn't want to miss it, would you?" I asked why she was pushing so hard, and that's when she slipped. "It's important people see us united. There are rumors. Some people don't understand Damien's business, and we don't want anyone thinking less of our family." There it was. Fear. Not of me, not of what they'd done, but of appearances, of reputation. For years, I had been the expendable one, the scapegoat. But now, unknowingly, they were handing me the greatest advantage I could have asked for, their desperation to keep up the image of perfection. I hung up that call with a calmness I hadn't felt in months. My body no longer ached from surgery. My finances were stable. My position in the new business venture was growing stronger by the day. And now, I had three undeniable truths: Damien's fraud, my father's sloppy financial trail, and my mother's obsession with appearances. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They had built their lives on a foundation of favoritism, manipulation, and lies. And all it would take was the right push at the right time to send the whole thing crumbling down. And I, quiet, overlooked, underestimated me, was standing in the perfect position to give that push. The night of the family reunion, I arrived later than usual. Not late enough to seem disrespectful, but late enough to ensure every eye in the room turned when I walked through the doors. The event was held at a rented banquet hall, polished floors reflecting golden chandeliers, a small stage at the front where speeches were already underway. My mother had insisted on this year's gathering being special. I knew why. She wanted to bury the whispers, the doubts creeping through the extended family about Damien's ventures. The moment I walked in, I caught sight of him. Damien stood at the center of the crowd, a glass in one hand and his other arm wrapped around my father's shoulder. His suit looked too expensive for someone who had always lived off the kindness, or stupidity, of others. He was grinning wide, teeth gleaming under the lights, as he boasted about his expanding enterprise. "And with family always behind me," he said, raising his glass, "success is inevitable." The crowd applauded. My parents glowed with pride. My sister rolled her eyes, but even she smiled like she was proud to be connected to him. I stood at the back for a moment, letting the scene settle in my chest. The same people who had left me to lie alone in a hospital bed were now applauding the man who had stolen from me and others, convinced he was the crown jewel of the family. I didn't rush. Revenge, after all, is sweetest when savored. I waited until after dinner, when the room was buzzing with chatter, before I approached my mother. She looked startled to see me, then quickly masked it with a smile. "Adrian, darling, so glad you came. See, we're all together again. Isn't this wonderful?" "Wonderful," I repeated softly, my gaze drifting to Damien. "Mind if I say a few words?" Her face tightened. "Oh, maybe later, dear." Damien prepared something, but I was already walking toward the stage. Conversations quieted as I climbed the steps. Damien's smug grin faltered for the first time, suspicion flickering in his eyes. I took the microphone, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make people shift in their seats. "I won't take much of your time," I began, voice steady. "I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. Family gatherings are important. They remind us who we can depend on when life takes unexpected turns." A few polite nods. My mother clasped her hands together tightly. "Some of you might know," I continued, "that not too long ago, I had to undergo emergency surgery. It was life-threatening. And while I lay in a hospital bed, recovering, this family," I paused, scanning the room, "chose to celebrate Damien's birthday instead. Not one of them came to see me." A ripple went through the crowd. I saw my aunt stiffen, my grandmother frown. My mother's smile froze in place. "But that's not the point," I said quickly, raising a hand before anyone could interrupt. "The point is that sometimes, the ones you expect to stand by you don't. And sometimes, the ones you least expect are the ones who see the truth. Like the people Damien has been doing business with." The room shifted uneasily. Damien's eyes narrowed. "Adrian, don't," he muttered under his breath, but the microphone caught it. I smiled. Calm. Patient. "See, I've been keeping records. And while my family was too busy applauding Damien's supposed success, I discovered where some of that money really came from. Bank transfers. Withdrawals from accounts that weren't his. Even my own card, used without permission. And then there are the investors, people in this very community, who handed Damien their trust and their savings, only to be met with lies." Gasps. Murmurs. My father stepped forward, his face red. "That's enough, Adrian. This is not the place." "On the contrary," I said, my voice sharp but calm. "This is exactly the place. Because this family prides itself on appearances, on pretending we're united. But unity built on fraud and favoritism isn't family, it's a con." The room erupted in whispers. Damien's mask cracked, his grin gone, replaced by a snarl. "You think you can ruin me with your little stories?" I pulled out the folder I'd brought, thick with printed statements, screenshots, and documents. I placed it on the table in front of me. Not stories. Proof. Enough to end your scheme before it destroys anyone else. And don't worry, I've already made copies. This isn't going away. My mother rushed forward then, her voice trembling. Adrian, please, let's not do this here. We can talk privately. But the whispers had turned into voices, accusations already being thrown Damien's way. One of the men at the table stood up, his face pale. You told me my money was safe. I gave you everything. Another followed, shouting, Is this true? The room descended into chaos, and I stepped down from the stage, my heart hammering but my face serene. My mother reached for me as I passed, but I pulled away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being overlooked. They all saw me now, not as the expendable son, but as the one who shattered their illusion. And as Damien floundered in the storm of his own making, I walked calmly to the exit, the noise of their outrage fading behind me. But that was only the beginning. Because revenge isn't just about exposing the truth. It's about making sure they feel the weight of what they did every single day afterward. The aftermath unfolded quicker than I could have imagined. Within a week of the reunion, Damien's entire scheme collapsed. The investors I'd quietly contacted beforehand, neighbors, cousins, even a family friend who had been pouring savings into his startup, filed formal complaints. By the end of the month, authorities were involved. Damien was dragged into hearings, squirming under questions he couldn't talk his way out of. His grin, that ever-present shield of arrogance, was gone. In its place was a pale, desperate man trying to salvage scraps from a crumbling empire. My father, once so proud of Damien, tried to shield him at first. He insisted to anyone who would listen that Damien had been misunderstood, that I had twisted the truth. But then investigators found traces of my father's own involvement. Money shifted from the emergency account into Damien's ventures. The paper trail was undeniable. Suddenly, Dad was no longer the stern patriarch, but a man cornered by his own negligence. His reputation in the community, once solid and respected, began to fracture. My mother, perhaps the most tragic figure in all of it, clung to denial. She called me in the days following, her voice shaking, begging me to take it back, as if truth was something I could erase with a simple apology. You've humiliated us, Adrian, she whispered once, her voice raw. Do you know what people are saying about our family? I wanted to tell her what I'd screamed inside that hospital bed a year ago, alone. Where were you when I needed you? But I didn't. I only said, now you know what it feels like. Word spread beyond family. Damien's name became poison in our town. The same relatives who once praised him now avoided him entirely. Friends who had toasted him at his birthday wouldn't answer his calls. He'd lost everything. His investors, his reputation, even the hollow sense of superiority he'd built his life around. As for my parents, their social circle shrank overnight. Invitations dried up. People whispered about the golden family that had covered for a fraud. For the first time, they couldn't hide behind appearances. And every time they looked at me, they saw the one who had pulled the curtain down. And me? My life moved forward. The business venture I had invested in continued to grow, steadily and surely. I no longer lived in fear of the next betrayal or the next blow to my bank account. My days were full, work I cared about, friends who valued me, a peace I hadn't thought possible. The last time I saw Damien was in court. He spotted me across the room, his eyes bloodshot, his face gaunt. For a moment, he looked at me the way he used to, like I was the weaker cousin, the one to be pitted or mocked. But then his gaze flickered to the folder in my hands, the records, the proof that had unraveled his empire, and he dropped his eyes. He couldn't hold my stare. That was the moment I knew it was finished. Because revenge isn't loud. It isn't a scream or a fight. Sometimes, it's simply standing tall when those who hurt you are brought low by their own choices. Sometimes it's walking away with your head high, knowing the people who once underestimated you will never forget what you did. And as I stepped out of that courthouse into the cool air, I finally felt the weight lift. They had left me to face death alone, but I had come back stronger than they could ever imagine. They wanted me invisible. Instead, I became unforgettable. My name is Ryan, I'm 22, and last June was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. I had worked my way through college without much help, juggling late-night shifts at a diner, tutoring jobs, and a few freelance gigs just to keep the lights on in my apartment. Graduation was my finish line, the moment I could finally prove to myself, and maybe, just maybe, to my family, that I had done something worth celebrating. But when I walked across that stage, there wasn't a single familiar face in the crowd. Not my mom, not my dad, not even my grandmother who never missed a church service in her life. The rows of empty chairs in the family section might as well have been spotlights shining on just how alone I was. You see, I have a younger sister, Claire. She's 20, only 2 years younger than me, and she's always been the golden child. The family excuse has always been that she's sensitive and needs more attention, which in practice meant she got everything she wanted. New clothes, brand name shoes, a car at 16 that I wasn't allowed to touch, even when my bike chain snapped and I had to walk 3 miles to school. When she found out she was pregnant at 19, my parents transformed the situation into a fairy tale. Suddenly, she wasn't a scared teenager making reckless choices. She was a glowing young woman, bringing the family together. They threw her a baby shower so extravagant it could have doubled as a wedding reception. Guess what date they picked? The same day as my graduation. At first, I thought it was just bad luck. Maybe the venue they wanted was only available that weekend, or maybe they didn't realize the dates overlapped. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I even called my mom a month before graduation, reminding her of the conflict. She said, "Oh, honey, we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll split the day." But as the weeks passed, the truth became harder to ignore. The invitations for Claire's baby shower went out, none of which mentioned my graduation. When I brought it up again, my dad told me flatly, "Ryan, you'll have plenty of ceremonies in your life. But your sister? This is once in a lifetime." I remember sitting in silence, gripping my phone so tightly I thought it might crack. Because how could they say that like my achievement was disposable? Like I hadn't been clawing my way toward that moment for 4 grueling years? The morning of graduation, I still held out hope. I kept checking my phone, expecting a message that they were on their way. Nothing. I looked around the campus parking lot as students and families streamed in, carrying bouquets and balloons. Still nothing. By the time my name was called, I had accepted what I already knew. They weren't coming. The cheers that erupted for other graduates sounded muffled in my ears. I walked across the stage alone, forced a smile at the dean, and accepted the diploma that had cost me countless sleepless nights. And just as I stepped down the stairs, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, thinking maybe, finally, they had texted something supportive. Instead, it was a message from my dad. "You owe us an apology." My heart stopped. My eyes skimmed the screen again, certain I was misreading. But the words were right there, followed by 37 missed calls. 37. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. Like I was the one who needed to crawl back to them after being abandoned. I couldn't even process it. My friends' families were crowding around them with flowers, hugs, and cameras. Meanwhile, I sat on the edge of a fountain, staring at my phone in disbelief. The text burned itself into my brain. Apologize for what? For existing outside the shadow of my sister? For daring to want a sliver of recognition that didn't revolve around her? I wanted to throw my phone into the water, but instead, I just shoved it in my pocket and clenched my fists until my knuckles went white. That was the moment when the first real crack split open between me and my family. Until then, I had tolerated the favoritism, the dismissive comments, the endless excuses. But that text, that audacity, was the first time I truly felt the weight of how twisted their priorities had become. I didn't answer. Not then, not for the rest of the day. I walked home with my diploma in a plain folder, no balloons, no flowers, no family dinner waiting. Just silence. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. That message wasn't just a stab in the back, it was a declaration. And if they wanted to play this game, I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. When I finally turned my phone back on later that night, the notifications stacked so high it felt like my family had been holding a trial without me. Voicemails from my mom started with that sweet tone she always used when she wanted to guilt me. "Ryan, honey, you need to understand this wasn't about you. We all had to be there for your sister. Family comes first." The next one carried a sharper edge. "You've embarrassed us by ignoring your father's calls. Claire was crying because you didn't congratulate her. Do you really want to ruin her big day?" By the third message, my dad's voice thundered through the speaker. "Pick up the phone and stop acting like a child. You've made your mother upset, and you need to apologize for your attitude." Apologize? That word had been hanging over me since the ceremony, and hearing it repeated in those messages made something in me twist. I sat on my bed, staring at the bare walls of my apartment, diploma case still unopened on the desk, and thought about how every milestone in my life had somehow been downplayed in the name of family unity. When I got my first job at 16, they told me not to brag because Claire was struggling with school. When I got accepted into college, they said it wasn't fair to talk about it at dinner since Claire wasn't applying anywhere. Now, the one day that should have been mine alone was sacrificed entirely for her baby shower. 2 days later, I made the mistake of stopping by the family house, thinking maybe face-to-face I could make them understand how much it hurt. I walked in to find pink balloons still taped to the living room walls, confetti scattered across the carpet, and baby gifts stacked higher than the couch. Claire was perched in the recliner like royalty, scrolling through her phone while my mom fussed over folding tiny onesies. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," my dad said the moment he saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate me. He just crossed his arms and gave me that look that meant I was already in the wrong. Claire didn't even glance up when she said, "Did you bring something for the baby? We're still accepting gifts." She said it like it was a joke, but her smirk told me she meant every word. My stomach churned. I had spent what little extra money I had on a new suit for graduation because I wanted to look sharp when I crossed that stage. I didn't have anything left for another round of baby shower gifts. "I came to talk," I said quietly, hoping to keep the anger out of my voice. But my mom cut me off before I could explain. "Ryan, this attitude of yours is unacceptable. We had to make a choice, and we chose to support your sister because she needed us more. You should have understood that." I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was just a misunderstanding. But she meant it. To her, it was that simple. Claire needed them. Therefore, my graduation didn't matter. "I needed you too," I whispered, more to myself than to them. My dad's eyes narrowed. "Don't start with that selfish talk. You think walking across a stage compares to bringing a new life into this world? You should be grateful we even came back here to celebrate you now." Celebrate me. That was the word he used as I looked around the room still decorated for Claire's shower, with no trace that anyone had remembered my milestone at all. Not a card, not a balloon, not even a congratulations. Just piles of pastel wrapping paper and rattles. I realized then that they didn't see me as someone worth celebrating. I was a footnote in their story about Claire. When I didn't answer, Claire finally set her phone down and smirked at me. "Don't sulk. You'll get over it. Besides, you'll probably have another graduation when you go for your master's, right? This one was just practice." The casual cruelty of her tone knocked the wind out of me. She genuinely believed my years of struggle, of clawing my way through college debt-free, were nothing more than practice. I left without saying another word. As I walked to my car, I heard my dad call after me, "You're not welcome back until you learn some respect." The door slammed, and that was that. That week, I watched as Claire posted picture after picture from her baby shower on social media. There she was, glowing in a floral dress, surrounded by mountains of presents and smiling relatives. Comments flooded in from extended family. "So proud of you, Claire. You're going to be a wonderful mother." Not a single mention of me, or the fact that I had graduated. It was like I had been erased from the family narrative entirely. I thought maybe an aunt or cousin would at least reach out privately, but when I saw them in person a few weeks later at a family barbecue, the truth hit me harder than any silence online. "You know, Ryan," my uncle said with a laugh, "you really shouldn't have skipped your sister's big day. That was selfish." My aunt chimed in, "Yes, we were all there, and it was beautiful. Your absence really cast a shadow." My absence. They made it sound like I had chosen to boycott, like I had intentionally ignored my sister's milestone to sulk about my own. No one believed, or cared, that it was the other way around. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I felt something inside me harden. For years, I had told myself that if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, maybe my family would finally see me. But now I understood. No amount of success would ever outweigh Claire's place on the pedestal they'd built for her. And as much as it hurt, that realization carried with it a strange, cold clarity. But I wasn't ready to act yet. Not then. First, I needed to see just how deep their favoritism would run. A few months passed after graduation, and I kept my distance. Calls went unanswered, texts left unread, family gatherings politely declined. I told myself I was done chasing approval, done bending just to feel included. But blood ties have a way of pulling you back, especially when guilt is woven into every word your parents ever spoke. By the end of summer, I was cautiously inching toward reconciling. My grandmother, the only one who'd ever shown me unconditional support, had been asking when I'd visit. She still thought the best of everyone, and part of me wanted to believe maybe things had cooled down enough for a fresh start. That fragile hope didn't last long. One Saturday afternoon, I drove over to the family house. The front door was wide open, laughter spilling out onto the porch. Inside, the living room was filled with relatives. Balloons again, this time in pale green, and a large banner strung across the wall. Welcome baby shower round 2. I froze in the doorway. Round 2? Claire hadn't even given birth yet. Apparently, one extravagant shower wasn't enough. My parents had decided to host another. And as I stepped into the living room, trying not to let my shock show, I noticed something else. Every relative was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had skipped my graduation without a second thought were now piled onto couches, balancing paper plates of food, cooing over Claire's belly as if she were a celebrity. I forced a smile when my grandmother spotted me and hurried over. "Oh, Ryan, you came. I'm so glad." She hugged me tight, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of belonging. But it didn't last. The second my dad saw me, his face tightened. "You weren't invited," he said flatly. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a knife. Conversation around us hushed. "This is for family," he added, as if I didn't qualify. Something in me snapped at that, but before I could respond, Claire piped up from her throne of pillows and gift bags. "It's fine, Dad. Let him stay. He can make himself useful." She looked right at me, her smirk widening. "You can help carry in the gifts from the car. They're heavy, and I'm not supposed to lift anything." Laughter rippled around the room. Some of it nervous, some of it genuine. I stood frozen, heat rising in my chest. Was I the entertainment now? The laborer brought in to haul boxes while everyone else enjoyed the party? I wanted to walk out then and there. But before I could move, my mom appeared beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Ryan, don't make this harder than it has to be. Your sister is carrying the next generation of this family. It's your duty to support her." Duty. That was the word she chose, as though my diploma, my years of work, my entire identity meant nothing compared to Claire's pregnancy. I clenched my jaw and followed Claire's boyfriend, Tyler, outside to the driveway. He was leaning against a brand new SUV with a smug look on his face. "Oh good, you showed up," he said, gesturing to the trunk filled with baby supplies, strollers, car seats, boxes of diapers. "We could use the extra hands. I'd help, but you know bad back." He tapped his side like it was some inside joke. I lifted the first box without a word, my silence the only shield I had against the fury boiling inside. When we came back in, the room erupted into applause. Not for me, of course, but for Claire as she held up another gift, squealing over tiny baby clothes. I set the box down in the corner and caught snippets of conversation. Ryan should really be more supportive. I heard he skipped the first shower out of spite. Poor Claire, having to deal with a jealous brother. Each whisper felt like another brick wall closing me off. Not only had they abandoned me on my graduation day, but now they had rewritten the story so that I was the villain. But the breaking point didn't come until dessert. Everyone gathered around as my dad tapped a glass with his spoon, calling for attention. "Before we cut the cake," he said, "I want to say a few words. Claire, we are so proud of you. You've brought this family together in a way nothing else ever has. You've given us purpose, something to celebrate. You're the reason we're all here today." Applause thundered through the room. Then he glanced at me. "And Ryan, well, maybe one day you'll understand what it means to put family above yourself. Until then, we'll keep praying for you." It was like the floor dropped out from under me. My own father, in front of everyone, reducing me to nothing more than a selfish disappointment. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. My grandmother's hand tightened on mine, but even her presence couldn't soften the sting. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just stood there, diploma unacknowledged, achievements erased, while my family applauded the sister who had never lifted a finger to earn anything. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The quiet resignation I'd carried for years hardened into something sharper. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was betrayal. I left that second baby shower without a word. No slammed doors, no shouting match, just quiet steps out of the house and into the evening air. The sound of laughter and applause followed me down the driveway, muffled once I closed my car door, but it still echoed in my head. As I gripped the steering wheel, I realized I hadn't even eaten a single bite of cake, and yet I felt sick to my stomach. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, new messages piling up already. I didn't have to look to know they were from my parents. Probably warnings about how disrespectful I had been by leaving early, or how I'd embarrassed Claire. I turned the phone off and drove home in silence. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, staring at the diploma case on my desk. I hadn't hung it up. I hadn't even framed it. What was the point? Every time I looked at it, all I could hear was my dad's voice saying Claire had given the family purpose in a way nothing else ever had. My achievement didn't matter, not to them, anyway. I kept replaying that moment, the way everyone's eyes turned toward me, not with pride but with judgment, as if I'd committed some unforgivable sin simply by existing outside Claire's spotlight. Days turned into weeks, and I started pulling away from everything. I stopped checking family group chats altogether, muted social media notifications, and spent my evenings walking aimlessly through the city just to keep from sitting in the silence of my apartment. At work, I put on a polite smile, but inside I was running on fumes. Friends would ask, "So how was graduation? Did your family come?" And I'd dodge the question, changing the subject before the lump in my throat could betray me. The loneliness dug deep. For so long, I believed that maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, my family would finally see me. Now I understood the truth. There was no finish line where I'd win their approval. They had chosen their story, and I didn't fit into it. That realization hollowed me out. Even grocery shopping felt heavy. Walking past young families, watching parents lift toddlers into carts, laughing together. I couldn't stop thinking, why couldn't my parents give me even half of that energy? The worst part was my grandmother. She called me often, her voice soft, always trying to bridge the gap. "Ryan, your parents don't mean to hurt you," she said once, though her tone betrayed doubt. "They're just caught up right now. Claire needs them." She wanted to believe the best, but even she couldn't hide the hesitation in her voice anymore. I loved her too much to burden her with the whole truth, so I'd just tell her I was busy or that I needed time. And then I'd sit in the quiet of my apartment, torn between missing her warmth and resenting the family she defended. One night, I got a voicemail from my dad that sank deeper than any of the others. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Ryan, your behavior has been unacceptable. We've talked it over, and until you apologize to your sister and the family, we can't welcome you back. You're isolating yourself, and that's on you. We'll pray you come to your senses." There it was again, apologize. As if the crime was mine, as if I were the one who'd abandoned them. I remember sitting on my bed, gripping my phone, my hands shaking. That single word had become a leash, one they expected me to wrap around my own neck. But somewhere in the fog of despair, a new thought began to form. If I was already the villain in their story, then maybe I didn't need to keep playing the role they'd assigned me. Maybe I didn't need to spend my life trying to win them over. I wasn't ready to act yet. I didn't have the strength. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet, I started sketching plans in my head. Not grand schemes of revenge just yet, but small ways to reclaim pieces of myself they had chipped away over the years. Framing my diploma, saving money for a place bigger than this shoebox apartment, finding people who saw me, not through the lens of my sister's shadow, but as myself. It was a fragile resolve, but it was a start. And though I hadn't yet decided what form it would take, I knew this. If my family wanted me to play the role of the forgotten son, they were in for a surprise. Because I wasn't planning to stay forgotten forever. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first, it was small, almost invisible, like planting seeds in soil I wasn't sure would ever grow. I started with my diploma. One Saturday morning, I took it to a frame shop. The woman behind the counter helped me pick a simple black frame with a matte finish. When I hung it above my desk, the apartment didn't feel so empty anymore. That piece of paper wasn't just a reminder of my family's absence. It was proof of my persistence, my grit. Every late-night shift, every essay I'd hammered out at 3 in the morning, every sacrifice I'd made. It was all there, staring back at me. And it was mine. Work was the next turning point. I'd been at my entry-level job for just a few months, mostly doing grunt work and keeping my head down. But once I stopped pouring my energy into chasing my family's approval, I found myself leaning into the work instead. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted, stayed late not because I had to, but because I wanted to master the details. My boss noticed. One afternoon, she pulled me aside and said, "Ryan, I see how hard you're working. How would you feel about leading the next project proposal?" My heart raced. It wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets and research, but it was a chance to prove myself on my own terms. I threw myself into that project. While my family was busy planning gender reveals and baby photo shoots, I was staying late at the office, learning presentation skills from YouTube tutorials, and refining my pitch until I could recite it in my sleep. When the day came to present, I stood in front of a panel of executives, my palms sweating but my voice steady. I laid out every detail with confidence I didn't know I had. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before the head of the department said, "That's the most thorough proposal we've seen from a junior associate in years." My boss beamed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Truly seen. The recognition came with a raise, modest, but enough to ease the constant anxiety that had lived in my chest for years. With that money, I upgraded my apartment. Nothing flashy, just a one-bedroom with more light and a kitchen that didn't feel like a closet. I painted the walls myself, filled the shelves with books I'd always wanted to read, and bought a decent coffee maker. Slowly, the space became a reflection of me, not a reminder of what I lacked. But the biggest change came socially. I had always been reserved, hesitant to let people in after years of being dismissed at home. Yet as I gained confidence at work, I found myself opening up more. I started saying yes to after-work drinks, joining colleagues for trivia nights, even letting a few friendships blossom into something deeper. One coworker, Alex, became a close friend. He was the first person I ever told the full story to: the skipped graduation, the baby shower, the text from my dad. I expected him to look at me like I was exaggerating, but instead he shook his head and said, "Man, that's brutal. No wonder you've been carrying that weight. But listen, your worth isn't tied to them. You're building something real, and they can't take that away." Those words stuck with me. For years, I had been desperate for my family to validate me, but here was someone outside of that circle reminding me I didn't need their permission to exist. And the more I leaned into my own growth, the clearer it became. I wasn't powerless anymore. I started to notice the contrast more sharply when I occasionally checked in on family through social media. Photos of Claire's baby showers, her nursery, the miracle of motherhood posts, they were everywhere. But beneath the shiny veneer, cracks showed. Tyler, her boyfriend, seemed less present with each passing month. Rumors circulated through extended family about money troubles, about fights behind closed doors. Meanwhile, my life was moving steadily upward. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I had stability, and I had earned it. The real turning point came one evening when my boss called me into her office again. "Ryan," she said, "I want you to consider applying for the management training program. It's competitive, but I think you'd be a strong candidate." My chest tightened with disbelief. Just a year earlier, I had been the kid sitting alone at graduation, staring at a text demanding an apology. Now, someone saw leadership in me. Someone believed I could step into a position of influence. That night, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at my desk beneath the framed diploma, and stared at the application form. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about whether my parents would approve or whether Claire would overshadow me. I was thinking about what I wanted and how far I'd come. The power I had once begged for in my family's eyes was beginning to take shape in my own. Still, the past wasn't gone. Their words lingered, sharp and heavy. And though I was building a life without them, I knew this story wasn't finished. Because sooner or later, the family that had cast me aside would come knocking again. And when they did, they would find someone very different from the son they had dismissed. It was almost eerie how the tides began to shift. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing scraps of approval. I was being sought out. My name started circulating in higher circles at work, not just for the management program, but also for the way I had a knack for organizing chaos. I became the go-to person when a project was falling apart, the steady hand people trusted when deadlines loomed. That reputation carried weight, and with it came influence. When I officially got accepted into the management training program, it was like stepping into an entirely new world. Leadership seminars, executive mentorship, strategy sessions. Doors that had always felt bolted shut suddenly swung open. One of the executives, a sharp but fair woman named Mary Ann, took a special interest in me. She pulled me aside after a presentation one day and said, "Ryan, you've got something people can't fake: resilience. Don't waste it. Learn how to leverage it." Her words became a mantra. I threw myself into learning, not just how to manage people, but how to navigate politics, how to read the room, how to play the long game. And slowly, I began to see how those same skills could apply outside of work. Because my family hadn't disappeared. They were still there, in the background, living their curated version of life online. Claire had her baby, a boy named Mason, and the family acted like it was the second coming. Photos flooded my feeds. My parents beaming as grandparents, Claire draped in pastel blankets with her miracle child. Captions about family being everything. Family being everything. I nearly laughed the first time I saw it. They had rewritten the narrative so completely that anyone looking in from the outside would assume we were the picture of unity. But reality has a way of seeping through cracks. A cousin of mine, someone I was still on good terms with, reached out over coffee one afternoon. "Ryan, I don't know if you know this," she whispered, leaning across the table, "but your parents have been asking around about you. They say you're distant, that you've lost your way. They're trying to make it sound like you're the problem." My jaw tightened. Of course they were. They couldn't admit they had abandoned me, so instead they were crafting a new story, that I had abandoned them. That same cousin also let something else slip, almost casually. "Claire and Tyler are having money problems. He's not working steadily, and the baby expenses are piling up. Your parents are stressed. They've been covering more than they expected." I sat back in my chair, my coffee suddenly tasting sharper. Money problems. Dependence. Cracks in the golden pedestal. For years, I had been the one scraping by, the one they dismissed as a burden while they funneled resources into Claire's every whim. Now, with their chosen star under pressure, the roles were shifting. And unlike them, I had built something stable, brick by brick, without their help. Around the same time, my boss offered me the chance to oversee a high-profile account. It wasn't just a promotion, it came with a significant raise and, more importantly, visibility. If I pulled it off, I'd cement my reputation not just in my department, but across the company. I worked harder than I ever had, channeling every ounce of hurt and rejection into laser focus. When the project launched successfully, bringing in record numbers, I was given a permanent management position. My salary doubled. My name started appearing in company newsletters. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I moved into a sleek new apartment, one with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. I bought a car that actually started on the first try every morning. And when I walked into meetings, people listened. I wasn't invisible anymore. That's when the first text from my mom arrived. "Ryan, sweetheart, it's been too long. We'd love for you to come by and see Mason. He's growing so fast. Sweetheart." The same woman who told me I needed to apologize was now dangling her grandson like bait. A week later, my dad called. I didn't answer, but the voicemail played in that calm, commanding tone I knew too well. "Ryan, it's time to let the past go. Your family needs you. Mason needs his uncle." Those words stuck with me. Your family needs you. For years, I had needed them, and they had turned away. Now, suddenly, the roles had reversed. And as much as it stung, it also lit a fire inside me. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on the back foot. I was in a position of strength. They needed me. And that realization, that delicious, dangerous realization, was when the idea of payback began to take shape. I didn't answer their messages right away. In fact, I let weeks pass. Every day, I left my phone on silent. Every text I ignored. Every voicemail I deleted without listening. It wasn't about being petty. It was about timing. For the first time, they weren't holding the cards, and I wanted them to feel that shift. Slowly, deeply. Then one afternoon, I ran into my cousin again. She smirked when she saw me. "You know, Claire's been asking about you a lot. Apparently, she and Tyler are in a bad spot financially. Your parents are covering their rent now. And with the baby, they're drowning." She paused, lowering her voice. "They keep saying, if only Ryan would step up." Step up. That phrase burned into me. For years, I'd been invisible, dismissed, mocked. Now, with their golden girl struggling, Suddenly, I was supposed to be the responsible one? No, not this time. That weekend, I dressed sharp, slim navy suit, polished shoes, the kind of look that made people straighten in their chairs when you walked into a room. I drove my new car, the one that gleamed under the sun, to my parents' house. I hadn't been back since the second baby shower, and as I pulled up, the sight of the same driveway where I'd once been ordered to haul boxes hit me with a jolt of memory. I rang the bell, and when the door opened, my mom's face lit up. "Ryan, oh, sweetheart, you came." She pulled me into a hug, but it felt rehearsed, too sweet, like she'd been practicing it in the mirror. My dad was in the living room, Mason in his arms, and Claire perched on the couch. The baby gurgled happily, the only innocent in the room. "Look at you," my dad said, eyeing the suit, the watch on my wrist. His voice carried that mix of pride and condescension I'd known all my life. "Doing well, huh?" "Better than well," I replied evenly, taking a seat. I let the silence hang for a moment before adding, "I heard you've been having challenges." The word made Claire's jaw tighten. "If you're here to rub it in, don't bother." My mom rushed to smooth things over. "What your sister means is, things have been difficult. Tyler's hours were cut, and the baby's expenses are overwhelming. We thought maybe, as family, you could help." There it was. The ask. They hadn't even tried to hide it. I leaned back, folded my hands, and looked each of them in the eye. "You want my help?" I asked slowly. The same family who skipped my graduation. The same family who told me I owed them an apology while I sat alone on the biggest day of my life. The same family who made me feel like I wasn't welcome in my own home. The room fell silent. Claire's cheeks flushed, and my dad's eyes narrowed. "That was the past," he said firmly. "We need to move forward. Family is about sacrifice." "Funny," I said with a small smile, "because I sacrificed for years, and all I ever got was silence. Now, you want my support. Why? Because the golden child isn't shining so brightly anymore." My mom gasped. Claire shot to her feet. "How dare you?" she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to raise a child." "You're right," I said, standing too. "But I do know what it's like to walk across a stage alone because my family decided a baby shower was more important than my future. I know what it's like to be erased from every conversation because my sister needed all the attention. And I know what it's like to build a life from nothing, without a dime or an ounce of encouragement from any of you." Their faces shifted: anger, shame, disbelief. I let the weight of my words settle before delivering the final blow. "You made your choice that day. You chose who mattered. And now, I'm making mine." I slipped a card onto the coffee table. Not a check, not cash, just my business card, sleek and simple with my new title embossed across it. "If you ever want to treat me like family again, start by acknowledging who I am now. Not the forgotten son, not the backup plan, but the person who stood on his own when you all turned away." Then I walked out. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I just left, the same way I had years ago. But this time, I wasn't broken. I was in control. The next day, I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages ranging from pleading to furious. One from my mom read, "Ryan, please, your sister is in tears. We didn't mean to hurt you. Can't you just help us this once?" Another from my dad said, "You're being selfish again. Family is about giving, not holding grudges." But I didn't reply, because for the first time, their desperation didn't feel like a burden I had to carry. It felt like justice. The weeks after my visit to their house were some of the strangest of my life. For years, I had been the one chasing after scraps of attention, the one calling, apologizing, begging to be seen. Now, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My parents alternated between guilt and fury. My mom's messages dripped with sorrowful pleas. "Ryan, we just want to start fresh. Mason needs his uncle." While my dad's were sharp commands. "Enough games. Step up for your family." Claire, on the other hand, was pure venom. One text read, "You think you're better than me now? Don't forget who gave up everything so you could have a normal life." I stared at that one for a long time, wondering what reality she was living in, because I couldn't recall her sacrificing a single thing for me. I ignored them all, not out of spite anymore, but because I realized I didn't owe them anything. Every call I declined, every message I left unanswered was a quiet declaration. I was no longer theirs to manipulate. The fallout hit harder than even I expected. My cousin called me one night, her voice buzzing with secondhand drama. "Your parents are furious," she said. They told everyone you refused to help, and now people are starting to ask questions. Aunt Linda straight up said, well, maybe if you treated Ryan better, he'd want to help. She chuckled. It's unraveling. Everyone's seeing it now. Then came the bombshell. Tyler, my sister's boyfriend, packed up and left. No warning, no long goodbye, just gone. Word spread fast. He'd been drowning under the pressure, resentful of the expectations, and one day he simply walked out, leaving Claire with an infant and a pile of overdue bills. My parents tried to keep it quiet at first, but you can only hide something like that for so long. Soon, the whispers turned into pitying stares at church, and the pedestal Claire had been placed on wobbled until it crashed to the ground. That was when the desperation reached its peak. My dad showed up at my office. He didn't make it past the lobby. Security called up to let me know a man was downstairs insisting he had to speak with me. I told them to send him away. Later, I found out he'd stood there for almost an hour, red-faced and pacing, before finally storming off. That night, he left me a voicemail that started in anger and ended in a cracked voice. Ryan, we just need your help. Please. But I didn't cave, because help wasn't what they wanted. They wanted control, the old dynamic where I was the forgotten son, forever reaching while they pulled the strings. And that person didn't exist anymore. Months rolled on, and my life only grew steadier. I got promoted again, my projects gaining recognition outside the company. I traveled for the first time, standing in airports with a passport in my hand, free in ways I never thought possible. I filled my apartment with laughter from friends who actually showed up for me, who cheered my wins without envy. Every step forward felt like reclaiming another piece of the boy they had tried so hard to erase. Meanwhile, the family that once smirked at my struggles began to unravel. Claire moved back in with my parents, her independence gone, her perfect life reduced to tense silence and financial strain. My parents, who once bragged about their united family, now fielded awkward questions about why their son never came around, why their daughter seemed so bitter, why their lives looked so different from the glossy picture they'd painted. The final nail came at my grandmother's birthday. She was the only one I agreed to see, and I rented out a small private dining room at a restaurant she loved. When I arrived, she hugged me tight, tears in her eyes, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." That was enough for me. But then, as the evening went on, I saw my parents and Claire enter the restaurant. They hadn't been invited. They must have found out through someone else. They spotted me across the room, me in a tailored suit, friends and colleagues at my side, my grandmother glowing with joy at the celebration I'd organized. They tried to approach, but the maitre d' stopped them at the door, reminding them it was a private event. My mom called out, voice trembling, "Ryan, please. Let us in. We're family." The room went quiet. Every eye turned to me. I stood, walked to the doorway, and looked at them one last time. Their faces were desperate, pleading, stripped of the arrogance they had once worn so proudly. "Family," I said quietly. "Family doesn't abandon you when you need them most. Family doesn't erase you. You made your choice. And now, I've made mine." I turned back into the dining room, and the maitre d' closed the door behind me. My grandmother reached for my hand, her smile steady. The noise of the restaurant faded, replaced by the warmth of people who truly cared. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I hadn't lost a family. I had built one. And as for the old one, the ones who demanded apologies, who smirked as I stood alone, they were left outside, knocking on a door that would never open again. I was 18 the first time I realized just how disposable I was to my own parents. Not in a dramatic teenage way, not in the slam the door, you never listen to me kind of way. No, I mean really, truly disposable. Like a cracked mug they didn't even bother trying to fix before tossing it in the trash. My name's Kyle, and if you asked anyone in my family back then, they'd probably tell you I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the kid who kept his grades up, worked part-time at the gas station down the street, and still managed to make dinner a few nights a week because both mom and dad worked late. I didn't mind. I figured if I just stayed out of trouble, didn't make waves, kept doing the right thing, it would all pay off somehow. You know? Like maybe I wasn't the smartest, or the funniest, or even the favorite, but I was steady. I was loyal. And that had to mean something. My younger brother, Dylan, was the opposite. 2 years younger, 14 going on 40. He had the charm, the dimples, the way of twisting a story until it came out like spun sugar in your ears. Everyone loved Dylan. Teachers, coaches, grandma, the neighbor who once caught him sneaking a joint behind the shed. She just smiled and said, "Boys will be boys." And my parents? They ate it up like gospel. I don't think it was malicious at first. Just easier. Dylan made them laugh. I made them grocery lists. Dylan got detention for cheating on a quiz. He's just bored with school. I pulled a B- in AP Bio. What happened to your focus? But still, I didn't resent him. Not really. He was my brother. I figured the world would catch up with him one day, and maybe then we'd be on even ground. The house we grew up in wasn't warm, exactly. It wasn't cold, either. Just practical. Rules posted on the fridge in laminated sleeves. Chores rotated on a chart. Affection was rare, but functional. A pat on the back if you did well. Not bad if you made honor roll. I wasn't the kind of kid who needed much, just a little fairness. A little trust. So when it happened, when the whole damn thing unraveled, I wasn't even angry at first. Just confused. Stunned, really. Like I'd slipped into someone else's life and couldn't find the script. It was a Friday. Early spring. I remember because the weather had just started warming up and I'd taken my hoodie off for the first time walking home from work. I was still in my red and white Petromart uniform, smelled like burnt coffee and stale air freshener. I just walked through the door when my mom came charging into the hallway like she'd been waiting for me to cross a tripwire. "Where is it?" she snapped. I blinked. "Where's what?" "Don't play dumb." "The cash. Dylan said you took it from his room." At first, I genuinely thought it was a joke. Like maybe he'd misplaced his allowance or something. But her face was stone. Her arms crossed like she was bracing for impact. "Mom, I just got off work. I haven't even been home since this morning." "Don't lie to me, Kyle." Her voice cracked, not with doubt, but anger. Like she was offended I'd even try to defend myself. "He said he had $300 saved from Christmas and his birthday. It's gone. And your backpack was in his room this afternoon." I looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "What? Why would I even be in his room?" "Maybe because you wanted money? You've been stressed about car repairs, haven't you?" The thing was, yes, my car had been acting up. A busted starter. I'd been walking to work all week. But the idea that I'd go into my brother's room and steal from him? That I'd wait until he wasn't home, sneak in like a thief? "I didn't take anything," I said quietly. And that was the moment something in her expression hardened. Like she'd already made up her mind. Like I was no longer her son, but a threat that needed to be neutralized. Dad came in a few minutes later, still in his suit from work. She briefed him quickly, and just like that, the jury was in. No questioning Dylan. No checking the rest of the house. No asking me anything past that first explosion. Just, "You need to leave," Dad said. I looked at him, waiting for the "just until we sort this out," or "just for the night." But he didn't add anything. "Are you serious?" My voice cracked worse than I expected. "You're kicking me out over a lie? You've been distant lately. Angry. This kind of behavior doesn't come from nowhere." "Dad, I didn't do anything." He didn't flinch. "Then maybe spending the night somewhere else will help you think about that." I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just walked to my room in a daze, grabbed my backpack and my phone, and left. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that I realized I had no idea where I was going. No close friends nearby. No spare keys to anyone's place. Just a dead car and a crumpled $5 bill in my pocket. So I walked. For hours. Eventually ended up at the bus station downtown, slumped against a bench with my hoodie pulled tight and my stomach growling. I don't think I slept more than 10 minutes at a time. The flicker of overhead lights, the occasional bark from some guy arguing with the vending machine, the constant shuffle of footsteps, it all blurred into one long, hollow stretch of time. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mom's face. My dad's silence. Dylan's smug little half-smile as he stood behind them during the whole thing, not saying a word. I waited 2 days before going back. 2 full days of silence. No texts. No missed calls. Not even a "where are you" from anyone. When I finally walked through the front door again, pale and stiff and cracked from the inside out, they barely looked up from the TV. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because 3 weeks later, we had a family barbecue. Grandma's 70th. Everyone was there. Cousins, aunts, uncles, the works. And that's when Dylan, in front of half the family, decided to tell the story. Not with shame. Not with guilt. But like it was a punchline. "You should have seen Kyle's face when Mom kicked him out," he laughed. "All over a fake 100 I printed for a prank. Didn't think they'd actually believe me. I froze mid-step, holding a plate of pasta salad. My heart started thudding so loud I couldn't hear the rest of the conversation. The blood drained from my face so fast I thought I might pass out. And Dylan? He just kept laughing, like it was some harmless childhood memory. And that's when I saw Grandpa. Quiet, stoic Grandpa, standing just behind Dylan, holding something in his hand. Something black, rectangular, familiar. A security camera DVR. And suddenly, I wasn't the one trembling anymore. Dylan was. Because he hadn't known Grandpa had cameras installed at the house when he came to fix the garage 2 months earlier, or that one of them pointed directly at the hallway outside both our rooms. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, paper plate in hand, heart thumping in my ears, watching Dylan's face shift as he caught sight of Grandpa behind him. First came the confusion, head cocked, brows raised. Then recognition. Then something darker. Fear. Regret. Maybe even guilt. But it passed too quickly. The smirk came back, and he tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Grandpa," Dylan said, voice wobbling. "Don't tell me you're still messing with that garage cam thing." Grandpa didn't respond. He just stepped forward, set the DVR down on the patio table like it was a loaded weapon, and quietly said, "I think it's time we watch something." The conversation died around us. Cousins went quiet. My Uncle Peter paused mid-bite. Even Mom, who'd been bragging about Dylan's mathlete trophy to Aunt Maria, turned around with a polite, confused smile. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked. Grandpa didn't look at her. "I was checking the wiring a few months back. Installed a camera to watch the driveway after the neighbor's car got keyed. Didn't mean to catch anything else. But it's all there." The silence was suffocating. I didn't move. My hands had gone cold. Dylan tried again. "It was a prank. Just a joke. We already moved past it. Kyle's fine, aren't you?" He looked at me like I was supposed to rescue him, like I'd laugh along and let him off the hook. But I couldn't even meet his eyes. I was stuck in the moment. I had spent 2 nights on a freezing plastic bench with nothing but a vending machine, apple juice, and the sound of strangers coughing in the dark. I was reliving every second of standing in that hallway while my parents looked at me like a stranger, like a criminal. Grandpa pressed play. The image on the screen was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. The camera showed the upstairs hallway. My backpack sitting by the stairs, exactly where I'd left it before work that day. Then Dylan appeared. Shirtless. Hair a mess. He tiptoed toward his room, glanced around, opened the zipper of my bag, pulled out one of his fake bills from a drawer in his room, and dropped it inside. He looked straight into the hallway, toward the camera, and grinned. Then he walked back to his room like nothing happened. Grandpa didn't say a word. Just let the silence stretch. The weight of it settled over the whole party. You could practically hear the collective shift, like everyone's mental image of Dylan had just tilted sideways and cracked. Dylan's voice was small. That's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, like the damage had already been done and no amount of "I told you so" could fix it. My mom's face turned pale. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Not even to me. Not yet. The barbecue fizzled out after that. People left early. Grandpa packed up the DVR and drove off without another word. Dylan disappeared inside, and I just stood there on the back porch for a long time, trying to decide whether to scream or cry or laugh like a lunatic. But that wasn't the breaking point. Not yet. That came later. Things didn't go back to normal. Not really. There were awkward apologies, stiff ones. Mom said things like, "We didn't have the full picture," and "You should have said something sooner." Dad mumbled something about stress at work, but none of it landed. None of it reached that part of me that had gone cold the night they shut the door in my face. Dylan didn't get punished. Not really. He got grounded for a week, but that just meant no Xbox. No family meeting. No consequences. No forced apology. He didn't even seem sorry. In fact, he started acting like he was the victim. Like he was the one who got betrayed because Grandpa spied on him. And my parents? They just wanted it to go away. Swept under the rug like everything else. "We need to move forward," my mom said one night at dinner, not looking me in the eye. As a family. But the damage had already carved deep. They didn't notice how quiet I became. How I stopped coming home right after work. How I spent hours in the library or wandering aimlessly through the mall just to avoid going home. They didn't notice when I dropped weight, when I started missing meals, when I turned down every attempt at small talk. They only noticed when I pushed back. One night, about a month later, Dylan came into my room without knocking. He threw a rolled-up sock at me, smirking like we were buddies again. "Hey, I need your laptop. Mine's dead." I didn't look up from my desk. "No," he scoffed. "Dude, come on. Just for an hour." I turned, slow. "You want my laptop? The guy you framed and got kicked out of the house." He rolled his eyes. "We're still on that." That was it. I stood up. "Get out." He raised his hands, mocking. Okay, geez." He backed out of the room, but not before muttering, "Still acting like a martyr, huh?" That night, I locked my door for the first time. The next day, I changed the password on everything. I stopped leaving my phone unattended. I started keeping my backpack with me at all times, even in the house. And when Mom asked me if I was okay, I just smiled and said, "Great." If they didn't care enough to protect me, I'd protect myself. But things kept getting worse. I found out from a friend at school that Dylan had started telling people I had mental health issues, that I was paranoid, obsessed with being the victim, and twisting stories to get attention. He said I made up the story about being kicked out, that I chose to sleep at the bus station to guilt trip our parents. He even showed people the security footage, but only part of it, just enough to make it look like a misunderstanding. He claimed it was an experiment for a psych project, that I overreacted, that Grandpa took it out of context. My reputation took a hit. Teachers treated me weird. Friends got distant. One even asked me if I was off my meds. That was when the anger finally caught up with the hurt. Because they didn't just ruin a weekend. They didn't just throw me out of my home. They let my name rot in public. They let him spin lie after lie until I didn't even recognize the person people thought I was. But the worst came the night I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to. I was walking past the living room when I heard Dad's voice, low and sharp. I paused just behind the corner. "I'm not saying we should ignore it," he said, "but Dylan's record matters. He's got a real chance at a scholarship, and we can't let one stupid prank ruin that." Mom sighed. "I know, but Kyle's so cold lately. Like he wants us to suffer." Dad's voice turned bitter. "He's always been dramatic. You remember the science fair in 6th grade? The meltdown over the ribbon? He's got that black and white thinking. It's always, I'm the victim with him." I stood there in the dark hallway, gripping the edge of the wall, feeling like a ghost in my own house. That's when I knew. They didn't believe me. Not really. Not in their bones. They wanted to believe me, because it was convenient, because it avoided conflict, but they still saw Dylan as the golden boy. And me? I was a stain they were trying to scrub out with polite smiles and forced meals. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat the next morning. I just stared at the ceiling and ran the same thought in a loop. They won't protect you. They never will. And that's when the shift happened. Quiet. Subtle. But permanent. I stopped hoping they'd change. I stopped expecting justice. I stopped thinking about what I wanted from them. Instead, I started thinking about what they had to lose. But I didn't do anything. Not yet. Because revenge takes patience. And Dylan? He wasn't done digging his own grave. Not by a long shot. The week after that conversation, I stopped being Kyle, the older brother. At least in their eyes. I was still there, technically. Still breathing under their roof. Still paying for my own gas when I could scrape enough tips together. Still folding laundry in silence because the machine was downstairs, and I didn't feel like getting into another who left their socks in the dryer argument. But emotionally, mentally, I was gone. Something in me had shut off. That last little flicker of faith I had in them. That sliver of belief that maybe they'd realize how badly they'd failed me, snapped clean. After that, it was just survival. Eyes forward. Mouth shut. Keep your head down and your hands clean. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to prove myself. I didn't want their approval anymore. I didn't want them to like me or believe me or clap when I did well. I wanted distance. Space. A way out. And that's when the fall really started. It came slowly. Quietly. Like a leak in the ceiling you don't notice until it's warped the whole floor. It started with school. My grades slipped, just a little at first. I'd always been a straight A student, the kind who double-checked homework and showed up early for exams. But suddenly, I didn't care. I couldn't focus. I'd sit in class staring at the whiteboard, watching the letters blur into static. Teachers noticed. Some pulled me aside, asked if everything was okay. I said it was. They nodded and moved on. Then came work. I started showing up late, missing shifts, forgetting to stock the coolers or sweep the floor. My manager, Brian, An older guy with bad knees and a permanently exhausted voice tried to give me chances. He liked me, or at least he used to. But eventually, even he had to cut me loose. "We're just not getting the same Kyle anymore," he said, patting my shoulder like he was sorry. I nodded, left my name tag on the counter, and walked out without a word. I didn't tell my parents I got fired. Didn't want to give them another reason to pretend they were disappointed in me. Not that they asked. As long as Dylan was doing well, captaining the math team, winning debate tournaments, flashing that charming grin, they didn't care what shadows I was disappearing into. I hit rock bottom a few weeks later. I had no job, no money, no friends left who hadn't swallowed Dylan's version of things. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the parking lot of an old strip mall, staring at a half-eaten sandwich I couldn't afford, wondering if this was it. If this was what the rest of my life was going to feel like. And then something strange happened. My phone buzzed. It was a text. From Grandpa. "You free this weekend? I could use some help with the cabin." The cabin. It was a rundown old place about an hour outside town, tucked in the woods near a lake. Grandpa used to take me there every summer when I was little. Fishing trips. Bonfires. Stories about the stars. It hadn't come up in years. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back one word. Sure. That weekend changed everything. Not overnight. Not in some dramatic, life-altering way. But it was the first time in months I felt like someone actually saw me. Grandpa didn't ask questions. He didn't prod or pity. He just handed me a toolbox and pointed at a broken gutter. "I need a second pair of hands," he said. "You still know how to climb a ladder?" I nodded and got to work. We spent the whole weekend fixing things. Cleaning out the crawl space. Sanding the porch. Hauling branches out of the driveway. At night, we sat by the fire with mugs of black coffee and the sound of crickets filling the quiet. He didn't ask me about Dylan. He didn't bring up the barbecue. But he did say this. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they share your last name." I didn't reply, just nodded slowly, staring into the flames. It was the first time I felt like my anger wasn't a burden. Like maybe I wasn't crazy. Like maybe I had a right to feel betrayed. That Sunday, before I left, Grandpa handed me a thick envelope. "It's not much," he said, "but it's enough to get the wheels turning." Inside were $500 in cash, a list of local job openings he'd circled in the newspaper, and a copy of the cabin key. "I want you to fix this place up. Use it. Stay here on weekends if you need to. Just build something for yourself. Away from them." I almost cried. Instead, I said, "Thank you," and meant it more than I'd meant anything in years. That was the beginning of the rise. I applied for 3 jobs that week. Got interviews at 2. Took a part-time gig working at a hardware store where the owner, a gruff woman named May, didn't care about my GPA or family drama, just that I showed up and didn't break things. The first paycheck wasn't much, but it was enough to refill my gas tank and buy new work boots. I started spending weekends at the cabin, cleaning it, painting it, replacing the busted windows one by one. I brought my own groceries, made my own meals, slept in my own bed. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I started reading again. Books I actually liked. Psychology, philosophy, home repair manuals. I even started journaling, something I'd always thought was dumb until I realized how much of my life I'd been bottling up. The journal became a safe place, a map of where I'd been and where I wanted to go. And slowly, things started clicking. I applied for a community college course in construction technology. Something practical, something I could do with my hands. Got in. Started classes in the evenings. Studied late into the night by candlelight when the power flickered at the cabin. No one knew. Not my parents. Not Dylan. I didn't tell them because I didn't need them to know. This was mine. Back at home, things were tense. Mom kept trying to pretend everything was normal. She'd ask how school was going, even though she had no idea I wasn't in the same program anymore. Dad barely spoke to me. And Dylan? Dylan had slipped back into his usual smug rhythm. Only now, there was an edge to it. A twitch in his confidence. Like he knew something had changed, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. I didn't argue. I didn't push back. I let him believe I was still broken, still bitter, still stuck in the shadow he thought he cast over me. But I watched. I listened. And what I heard changed everything. It was late one night. I was in the kitchen, heating up leftovers, when I heard Dylan on the phone in the den. His voice was low, but the walls in our house weren't exactly soundproof. "Yeah, but if I say he threatened me," Dylan was whispering, "they'll have to take it seriously. He's already got the reputation. I just need someone to vouch for it. Pause. No, I'm not lying. I'm just exaggerating. Another pause. I don't care if he gets kicked out. Honestly, it's about time. He's just dragging everything down. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just stood there, bowl in hand, while something icy slid down my spine. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And now? Now he was planning to push me out completely. That night, I drove to the cabin and sat on the porch until sunrise. Because I realized something important. Dylan didn't just want attention. He didn't just want to be the favorite. He wanted to erase me. He wanted me gone, not just from the house, but from the story entirely. And for the first time in my life, I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not fear. Not sadness. Focus. He thought I was still the quiet older brother. But he had no idea who I'd become. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was building something. And soon, I was going to show them all what that looked like. Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with silence. With stillness. With watching the pieces move on their own. Until you finally decide it's your turn to move one back. That night on the porch, watching the sky turn from ink to ash, I started sketching out the first pieces of a plan. Not some wild scheme with fireworks and courtroom drama. No, I wasn't looking to humiliate Dylan in front of the whole school or burn down our house in a blaze of vengeance. I didn't want noise. I wanted certainty. I wanted Dylan to dig his own hole, thinking he was winning, until the dirt was so high around his neck that even Mom and Dad couldn't pretend not to see it. I just had to hand him the shovel. The first step was getting proof. Real, undeniable, ironclad evidence. I knew what he'd been planning, trying to frame me again. But if I confronted him, he'd weasel out of it like always. He'd twist it into a misunderstanding or just a joke, and our parents would nod along like they always did. So instead, I played along. I went quiet again, kept my head down, started acting off, left my door unlocked, left my bag out, left my phone charging in the open, made it look like I was slipping again. Dylan started circling within 2 days. Little comments. You feeling okay, man? You've been kinda spaced lately. You sure everything's cool? I nodded, said I was just tired. And the moment I saw him watching me a little too long from the hallway mirror, I knew he was starting to line something up. So I turned the cabin into my war room. I bought 2 small cameras off Craigslist for cash. Nothing fancy, just motion-triggered, with Wi-Fi upload and a 2-week loop. I spent a weekend learning how to configure them, then carefully installed one behind the bookshelf in my room, angled perfectly at the door and my desk. The other? I stashed inside an old portable speaker in the hallway, pointed toward my room. Both were synced to an old laptop I kept at the cabin, completely offline. No one knew, especially not Dylan. The next step was harder, rebuilding my reputation. See, the lies he'd told still lingered. Some teachers still gave me side eyes. A few classmates flinched when I passed in the hall, like I might explode into a breakdown at any moment. But I wasn't trying to win everyone back. Just a few key people. So I started showing up early to class, quietly offering help to the students who struggled, especially the ones Dylan had charmed and then ghosted when they stopped being useful. I volunteered at the school workshop after hours, helping refurbish old furniture with Mr. Henley, the shop teacher with hands like oak roots and a memory like a steel trap. I didn't talk much, didn't bring up my brother, just kept showing up. Reliable, consistent, useful. It took a few weeks, but the whispers started to change. Hey, Cal help me with that trig homework. He's actually chill. Didn't know he was in the shop program. Dude smart. Even Mr. Henley, who hadn't said more than 3 words to me all year, gave me a nod one evening. Good hands. Steady. You ever think about an apprenticeship? I didn't say it out loud, but that was the moment I knew. I wasn't trapped anymore. I was building a way out. Now I just needed to give Dylan enough rope to hang himself. And, as usual, he delivered. About a month after the hallway recording, I came home late from the cabin one Sunday night. When I got to my room, my phone, normally locked and charging by my desk, was sitting on my pillow. Screen cracked. Battery low. And when I turned it on, half my apps were rearranged. Classic mistake. Amateur mistake. I didn't say anything. Just grabbed the speaker from the hallway, popped out the hidden card, and drove back to the cabin that night. The footage showed exactly what I expected. Dylan creeping into my room, checking the hallway first, picking up my phone, unlocking it. He'd been watching me type the code, opening apps, scrolling through my messages, taking photos of my journal. then pocketing the phone and disappearing for 20 minutes before dropping it back. I watched the clip 3 times. Then I made a copy. And another. Stored one on a flash drive taped to the back of a drawer at the hardware store. Uploaded one to cloud storage under a burner Gmail. Saved another on a hidden partition of Grandpa's old laptop. I wasn't going to lose this one. At that point, I was almost ready. But I needed one last thing, someone on the inside. Someone in the family who saw what was happening but wasn't too far gone to admit it. And that's when Aunt Melissa came back into the picture. She was my mom's younger sister. Used to live out of state, but moved back to town after her divorce. She showed up at family dinners again, a little older, a little rougher around the edges, but sharp. Always had a sixth sense for tension. One night, during a small dinner at Grandma's, she pulled me aside on the porch while everyone else was fawning over Dylan's Student of the Month plaque. "You look like you're planning something," she said, lighting a cigarette with one hand. "And I don't think I want to stop you." I raised an eyebrow. "That obvious?" She blew out a stream of smoke. "I know your brother. Always thought he was a snake in a varsity jacket." That was all I needed. I handed her a thumb drive the next day. "If anything happens to me," I said, "you make sure this gets shown to Grandpa." She took it without hesitation. "I'll do you one better," she said. "I'll keep it in my safe." Just like that, I had an ally. The final piece fell into place at a school fundraiser. Dylan was scheduled to give a short speech, something about student leadership and ambition. My parents were beaming. Mom had her phone ready to record. Dad had even ironed his shirt. They invited me to come, like they were offering me a crumb of dignity. I smiled, said sure. That night, I sat in the crowd, calm and patient. I watched Dylan step onto the stage with his polished charm, that practiced smile, that perfect posture. I even applauded with everyone else. Then, as he started speaking, I pulled out my phone, opened the Dropbox link, watched, in real time, as Dylan's face appeared on screen in black and white, creeping into my room, stealing my phone, smiling like the little king he thought he was. I watched it again. Then I texted the link to my mom, to my dad, and to every teacher Dylan had mentioned by name in his application essays. Then I turned off my phone, leaned back in my seat, and listened to him talk about integrity. It was almost poetic. And I wasn't done. Because that wasn't the revenge. That was just the ignition. The explosion was coming next. I left before the fundraiser ended. Not because I was scared. Because I'd already won. I slipped out of the auditorium just as Dylan hit the climax of his speech, some canned metaphor about rising together like a tide of ambition, and walked through the cold night air to my car. The cabin key sat in my pocket. The engine purred to life. And as I pulled out of the lot, I could already feel it beginning. The shift. It's a strange thing, knowing you've lit the fuse. That any minute now, the life someone built on lies is about to go up in smoke. And you won't have to raise your voice, throw a punch, or even be in the room when it happens. All you have to do is wait. The first fallout hit the next morning. I woke up in the cabin, birds chirping like they hadn't just witnessed a social nuclear detonation. I made coffee, showered, and sat out on the porch in flannel and boots while checking my email. For unread messages. 3 were from teachers. 1 was from Principal Hartley. Every message had the same undertone. "We need to talk about what we saw." Apparently, not long after Dylan's speech ended, my mom's phone had buzzed during the applause. She'd opened the video in full view of the parents seated beside her. Word spread quickly. Someone, a friend of a teacher, I think, projected the clip on the whiteboard during cleanup. Dylan never even made it off the school grounds before the whispers started. By morning, the video was everywhere. Teachers, students, scholarship committees, even the student council Discord server, where someone posted it under the caption, "Student of the Month caught acting like a Bond villain." Dylan didn't go to school that day, or the next, or the next. At home, my parents cracked. Dad stormed into my room Wednesday night, holding his phone like it was covered in acid. "Did you do this?" he asked, voice sharp and bitter. "I sent a video," I said calmly. "The rest happened on its own." He stared at me, mouth twitching like he wanted to yell, but couldn't figure out what for. "You embarrassed this family." "No," I said, standing. "Dylan embarrassed this family. I just told the truth." He looked away, didn't say a word, didn't apologize, just walked out, shutting the door softly behind him like I was a guest in my own house. Mom tried a softer approach the next day. Knocked gently, brought up how people make mistakes, and he's your brother. I asked her if she remembered kicking me out over a lie. She left in tears. I didn't follow. Dylan's fall was slow, ugly, and public. His scholarship application was withdrawn. His student council position was revoked. The school board launched an ethics inquiry, which was a fancy way of saying, we're finding a reason to distance ourselves from this mess. His friends dropped him. His social media turned into a battlefield. Half, leave him alone. Half, wow, what a manipulative freak. But the worst came when Grandpa found out. Aunt Melissa handed him the original footage and the full audio of Dylan's hallway conversation, the one where he talked about framing me again. Grandpa didn't raise his voice, didn't rant. He just called a family meeting. Kitchen. Sunday. No excuses. Everyone showed up. Mom, Dad, Dylan, me. Aunt Melissa sat at the end of the table, sipping coffee with one eyebrow raised like she was watching a live episode of a true crime show. Grandpa stood. I'm not here to mediate, he said, his voice low and even. I'm here to set things right. He plugged in a flash drive. Played the video again, this time on the living room TV. The full version. The hallway footage. The room footage. The audio of Dylan conspiring to smear me. All of it. No one spoke. When it ended, Dylan looked up with bloodshot eyes and whispered, I didn't think it'd go this far. Grandpa stared him down. You made it go this far. Then he turned to my parents. You too, he said, pointing. Owe Kyle more than an apology. You owe him your damn respect. Dad flinched like he'd been slapped. Mom burst into tears. From this point forward, Grandpa continued, you don't get to pretend this didn't happen. You don't get to play neutral. You either own up to what you allowed, or you don't speak to me again. It was the only time I'd ever seen him furious. And yet, he didn't raise his voice once. He just stared at them. And for once, they had nothing to say. That night, I packed my things. Not in anger. Not in exile. Just done. Grandpa had already offered to let me stay at the cabin full time. Aunt Melissa even offered her guest room if I ever wanted something closer to town. But I didn't want pity. I just wanted space. Before I left, Dad stood in the doorway, awkward and stiff. We weren't trying to hurt you, he said. I shrugged, slinging my bag over my shoulder. But you did. He lowered his head. What happens now? I looked him in the eye. I live my life. You live yours. And then I walked out. Life got quiet after that. Peaceful even. I got a full-time job working construction under Mr. Henley's brother. Started saving money. Took night classes. Learned how to build walls, lay brick, pour concrete. Real, solid things. Things that stayed where you put them. Things that couldn't be twisted by someone else's lies. I kept fixing up the cabin. Installed solar panels. Painted the deck. Built a fire pit out back where I'd sit at night and stare at the stars, wondering how long it had been since I last felt this free. Grandpa visited every Sunday. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we'd just sit. But he always brought coffee and left a 20 on the table for groceries. Even though we both knew I had enough. I never asked for anything more. Neither did he. Dylan never recovered. He switched schools mid-year. Deleted all his social media. Last I heard, he was doing community service to make up for academic dishonesty and personal misconduct. His friends scattered. His charm fizzled. No one remembered the math trophies or the leadership speeches. They remembered the smirk on his face when he planted fake evidence in his brother's bag, and the footage of him pacing the hallway, whispering about exaggerating things to get me kicked out again. Funny how long a reputation takes to build, and how fast it crumbles. My parents tried to reach out a few times. Text messages, voicemails, even a birthday card with a check and a note that said, "We're proud of you." I sent the check back. Didn't return the call. Some bridges don't need burning. They collapse on their own. It's been a year now. I've got savings. A certification in progress. A steady job. A truck that doesn't stall when it rains. A home with my name on the mailbox and a lock only I hold the key to. I'm not angry anymore. Not bitter. Not broken. I'm just free. And I built that freedom with my own hands. From the ground up. With no help. No shortcuts. No family name carrying me. Just truth. Just grit. Just a quiet, steady climb out of the hole they pushed me into. And now, when I look back on it all, I don't think about the bus station or the cracked phone or the lies. I think about the moment Dylan realized the camera was rolling. The moment the golden boy saw the mirror held up to his face and finally saw what the rest of us had always known. And I think, that was the day I got my life back. That was the day I stopped surviving and started living. That was the day I won. When I was 16, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never rely on anyone to save me. Not my parents, not my teachers, not some magical opportunity that might fall into my lap. Just me. That promise shaped every decision I made after that, even if no one around me noticed or cared at the time. Especially not my parents. If you asked them back then, I was just the quiet one. The kid who always had his head buried in a laptop. The one who didn't understand how the world works. Meanwhile, my older brother, Aaron, walked around like he was born wearing a crown. Every birthday felt like his coronation. Every dinner was a performance of his supposed brilliance. And my parents? They clapped the loudest. My name's Carl. I'm 24 now. But this story starts a few years back, when I was just turning 21. By then, I had already paid off my student loans. Yes, all of them. I had bought my first home in cash, nothing flashy, just a small place in the suburbs. And I had grown my e-commerce business into something I could be proud of. 6 figures in revenue, a few freelancers under me, and the kind of freedom that most people my age only dreamed about. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post about it. I just kept my head down and worked. Because I knew, deep down, that if I ever stopped to celebrate, someone would try to take it from me. Turns out, I was right. Growing up in a small town, everyone knew everyone's business, especially when you had a last name like ours. My dad, Martin, was a regional manager for a construction supply company. He wore his title like a badge of honor. My mom, Cheryl, floated between part-time jobs and being a full-time supporter of Aaron's ambitions. Aaron, 2 years older than me, had always been the golden child. My parents used to joke that Aaron came out of the womb with a winning smile and a scholarship offer. It didn't matter that he failed classes, wrecked 2 cars, or once maxed out my dad's credit card on a spring break trip he wasn't even supposed to be on. Every time, my parents found a way to brush it off. He's just finding himself, they'd say. He's meant for great things. And me? I was the backup plan, the invisible sibling. I still remember one Thanksgiving dinner, not long before all hell broke loose. We were sitting at my parents' house, turkey half-carved, my mom already a glass and a half into her boxed wine. Aaron had just come back from trying out a startup idea in LA that ended, predictably, with him crashing on someone's couch and begging to come home. My parents welcomed him back like a war hero. At dinner, my dad raised a glass. To new beginnings, he said, looking directly at Aaron. We know your next chapter is going to be a big one. Aaron smirked and clinked his glass. I said nothing. No one toasted me when I bought my house. No one even mentioned it. They all knew. I told them months earlier. Sent photos. Offered to host them. I never got a response. But Aaron moves back in with 2 duffel bags and debt collectors on his tail. And suddenly, he's the phoenix rising from the ashes. I tried not to let it get to me. I really did. I'd spent years building my business, learning SEO, product sourcing, customer service. Every late night, every missed party, every little win I quietly celebrated alone in my apartment. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would finally be enough to earn a little respect. But I should have known better. In our house, effort didn't matter. Results didn't matter. What mattered was image, charm, drama. And Aaron had all of that in spades. A week after that Thanksgiving, my mom called me. Her tone was weird, tight, rehearsed. She asked if I could come over to talk. I assumed it had something to do with Aaron. Maybe they wanted me to help him find a job or pretend to be a reference. I was used to being the quiet fixer, the ghost behind the curtain. But when I showed up, I knew something was off. My dad was sitting in his recliner, arms crossed, TV muted. Aaron was on the couch, wearing sweatpants and looking smug, like he was in on some inside joke. My mom had that nervous smile she always used when she was about to say something she knew was going to upset me. She gestured to the kitchen table. Why don't we sit down? I remember how slow I moved. How the air felt heavy, like something was about to shift. I sat. My mom took a breath. Then she said it. We were hoping you could help Aaron with a little investment. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. Investment. As if I was some angel investor they could charm into saving their sinking ship. I blinked. What kind of investment? Aaron leaned forward. I've got this idea. It's like a subscription box service, but for tech gadgets. You know, like those mystery boxes. We could market it to college kids. Low overhead, high margins. I looked at him, then at my parents. And you want me to fund it? My dad cleared his throat. Not fund, exactly. Just help him get started. You've had a good run, Carl. You've done well for yourself. It's time to pay it forward. Pay it forward. Like I had been handed something for free. Like my 3 a.m. customer emails, my 14-hour workdays, my ramen-fueled grind through college meant nothing because I hadn't done it the right way. I'm sorry, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. But I'm not in a position to just throw money at a vague idea with no business plan. Aaron rolled his eyes. It's not vague. I've got contacts. I know people. You've been back here for 2 weeks, I said, living in the guest room. That was a mistake. I saw the way my mom's face hardened, the way my dad leaned forward. My mom set her hand on the table. Carl, we're just asking you to help your brother. Family supports each other. I've supported myself since I was 18, I said, standing up. That's how I was taught, right? They didn't answer. And I left. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they'd guilt trip me, maybe send a few passive-aggressive texts, and then move on. That's how it had always gone. But I didn't know how desperate things were about to get. I didn't know just how far my parents were willing to go to protect their golden boy. Because the next time I saw them was in court. But that's jumping ahead. There's more to tell, so much more. The silent war that started with a favor and turned into a full-blown legal ambush. The betrayal. The lies. The moment I realized my own parents were willing to destroy me, just to prop up the son who had never lifted a finger. And how I decided, finally, to stop turning the other cheek. They didn't knock. It was a Wednesday night, and I remember that clearly because it was inventory night. The least glamorous part of my business, but the most essential. Every week, I'd haul boxes out of the storage room, scan and repackage products, prep orders for my fulfillment partners. That night, I was ankle-deep in shipping labels when I heard the sound of my front door opening. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I lived alone. No one had a spare key. Then I heard the unmistakable click of the deadbolt sliding shut again, and the low murmur of voices, 3, maybe 4. And one of them was Aaron. I came around the corner fast, heart pounding. What the? My parents were in my entryway. Aaron was behind them, smirking like he owned the place. And my dad? He had a manila folder under his arm, and that self-righteous look he used to wear whenever he lectured me about attitude as a kid. My mom gave me a tight-lipped smile like this was a casual family visit, not a break-in. How did you get in? I asked, stunned. We used the key, my mom said. Like it was nothing. Like the emergency spare I'd once given them years ago, back when I still thought we had something resembling a healthy relationship, was an open invitation to waltz in unannounced. I held out my hand. Give it back. Now. She hesitated, then fished it from her purse and dropped it into my palm like a child caught stealing. But it wasn't just that. It was the look in her eyes. She wasn't embarrassed. She was disappointed. At me. What are you doing here? I asked, more tired than angry. Aaron shrugged, stepping into the living room like he owned it. We tried being polite. You slammed the door in our faces. So now we're handling things the proper way. The proper way? I echoed, narrowing my eyes. My dad laid the folder on my kitchen island and slid it across. It's time we had a serious talk, Carl. About what you owe this family. I didn't open the folder. Not yet. I was too busy trying to figure out if I was dreaming. You're in my house. Without permission. You have 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't call the cops. Oh, please, my mom said, like I was being dramatic. You're acting like a stranger. I wonder why, I shot back. Just read the paperwork, my dad said, nodding at the folder. I flipped it open. At first, it didn't register. Legal language. Names. Numbers. A claim filed and their names against me. Then the words hit me like a slap. Fraudulent withholding of assets. Misappropriation of family investment. Unjust enrichment at the expense of sibling. I stared at the page. What the hell is this? My voice cracked, sharp and loud in the stillness of my home. Aaron stepped up, arms crossed. It's what you get when you lie about where the money came from. I didn't lie about anything. Oh, come on, he said, rolling his eyes. We all know you didn't build this business from scratch. You used the money Grandpa left, didn't you? My jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? He grinned like a cat who had just cornered a mouse. You think I didn't notice how you suddenly got real cozy with e-commerce the year Grandpa died? That's when your little side hustle blew up. Admit it. I didn't get a cent from Grandpa's estate, I said, stunned. He left everything to Grandma. She made that clear. Yeah, And she always had a soft spot for you, my mom said quietly, even when Aaron was the one who needed help. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You break into my house, throw false accusations at me, and what? You want me to admit to stealing money I never touched? We want what's fair, my dad said firmly. Aaron has been struggling. You've clearly been profiting. It's time to rebalance the scales. There it was. The mask was off. I had expected manipulation, maybe guilt trips. But this? A lawsuit? Against their own son? Something in me cracked. Years of being overlooked, talked down to, treated like a background character in Aaron's story, all of it boiled over at once. You want to rebalance the scales? I said, voice shaking. Let's talk about scales. Let's talk about the 2 cars you bought him before he was even 20. The way you co-signed his loans, paid off his credit cards, and let him move back in every time he failed. You've given him everything. And me? I've never asked you for a single cent. Because you were always too proud, my mom snapped. Because I had to be. I shouted. You never offered. You never believed in me. You never even asked what I was building. And now that it worked, you think I owe you? There was silence for a beat. Then Aaron muttered. You wouldn't even have a future if it weren't for this family. My fists clenched. You mean the family that's suing me? My dad took a step forward. You can avoid all of this. If you just help your brother get on his feet, we can drop the claim. Clean slate. You mean hand over my money so you don't drag my name through the mud? He didn't answer. I picked up the folder and tossed it back. Get out. Now. My mom looked like she wanted to argue. My dad looked like he wanted to punch a wall. Aaron didn't say a word, just turned and walked out with that smug swagger that said he thought he'd won. But they hadn't won. They'd lit the fuse. Over the next few days, the fallout started trickling in. A letter from their lawyer arrived first, confirming they were going forward with the claim. Then came the calls from extended family, uncles, cousins, even old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly wanting to check in after hearing some things. The rumor mill was spinning fast, and all of it painted me as the villain. I tried to stay focused. My business was still running, orders still flowing. But I couldn't ignore the way everything felt, poisoned. Every email notification felt like it might be a subpoena. Every family text felt like a trap. I stopped sleeping. I started checking my front door 3 times a night. And then, 3 weeks after the break-in, I got the email that made everything real. It was from my bank. One of my business accounts, frozen. Pending investigation tied to a legal dispute. My heart stopped. I clicked through, fingers trembling. I'd done nothing wrong. Paid all my taxes. Kept clean records. But now, thanks to their baseless claims, I was being treated like a criminal. I called the bank. They were polite, but firm. The freeze would stay in place until the claim was resolved in court. Aaron had said he'd make things fair. He was dragging me into the mud, and my parents were handing him the rope. I thought that would be the worst of it. But then I found out something that made my blood run cold. Aaron hadn't just filed a lawsuit. He'd filed a restraining order. Against me, claiming I'd threatened him. Claimed I was erratic, hostile, and a danger to his safety. I stared at the copy in disbelief. The timing wasn't a coincidence. He was trying to portray me as unstable, so the court would believe his story, not mine. It was character assassination, plain and simple. A smear campaign built on lies and funded by the same people who used to tuck me in at night. That was the breaking point. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about the lawsuit. It was about principle. About standing up to people who had used love as a leash and expected me to roll over and thank them for it. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to apologize. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my life. They wanted a war. Fine. I'd give them one. And the first shot would be fired at the one secret they thought I didn't know, the financial skeleton in their closet. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning in early spring. The sun was out, but I barely noticed. I hadn't slept the night before. Too wired, too angry, too focused on every worst-case scenario running on a loop in my head. My lawyer, a guy named Miles who I found through a friend of a friend, assured me the case was weak. This isn't going anywhere, he'd said. Judges can smell fabricated drama a mile away. Still, I was shaking when I walked into the courthouse. I wasn't scared of losing the restraining order case. I was scared of what it meant, that Aaron was willing to go this far. That my parents were willing to swear under oath that I was violent, unstable, and a danger to my own brother. That they were coaching him on what to say. I knew it in my gut. Their names weren't on the document, but their fingerprints were all over it. That morning, they all showed up. Aaron walked in wearing a blazer that didn't fit, acting like he was the victim of some mafia vendetta. My parents sat behind him like his personal support team, Mom dabbing fake tears, Dad scowling at me like I'd ruined the family name. When the judge threw out the case 20 minutes in, citing insufficient evidence and clear motive of financial retaliation, they acted shocked. Aaron even tried to speak again after the gavel dropped, like he thought he could convince the judge to change his mind. But it was over. For that part, anyway. I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. Because even though I'd technically won, I knew this wasn't over. The restraining order wasn't the real attack. It was just a distraction. A character hit piece designed to soften me up before the lawsuit began. And it worked. Not in court, but in my head. I went home that day, sat on my living room floor, and stared at the unopened boxes of unsent inventory stacked by the wall. For the first time in years, I didn't want to work. I didn't want to fight. I just sat there, in silence, feeling like I'd lost something I couldn't name. Over the next month, everything stalled. My business accounts remained partially frozen. I moved some operations to a backup account, but the damage was done. My cash flow took a hit, my ad budget dried up, and my fulfillment timelines got slower. Customers noticed. Some backed out. One of my best-selling suppliers dropped me, claiming reputational risk. I tried to explain, tried to fight through it, but the more I pushed, the more I felt like I was drowning in mud someone else had poured over me. I was losing my footing, not just financially, but mentally. And then came the worst blow. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. My landlord for the warehouse space I rented, barely 800 square feet, but it had become the beating heart of my operation, told me he wasn't renewing my lease. Too much legal noise, he said. I've got other tenants. I can't afford drama. I begged. I offered to pay 3 months ahead. He didn't budge. I hung up and stared at the wall. That was the moment. Rock bottom. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just quiet. Cold. Like something inside me finally broke loose and drifted away. I'd spent 3 years building something that worked, something honest, something mine. And in less than 2 months, the people who raised me had almost destroyed it. I could have folded. I thought about it. I even started drafting a letter to the court agreeing to settle. Something low, just enough to make them go away. But I didn't send it. Because that night, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her name was Elise. She used to be my neighbor when we were kids. We'd played backyard tag, ridden bikes through the cul-de-sac. We lost touch after she moved away in middle school. I hadn't thought of her in years. But there she was, messaging me through LinkedIn of all places. Hey Carl, she wrote. I saw your name in a mutual post and did a double take. I remembered you from back home. I was sorry to hear about the lawsuit. Just wanted to say, don't let them take what you've built. You were always the smart one, the quiet one. But we all knew. I read that message over and over. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me who I used to be. The kid who stayed up late watching YouTube videos on coding, who once sold homemade candles door to door for fun. The kid who made things, even when no one paid attention. And suddenly, I realized something. They couldn't take that from me. They could freeze accounts, spread lies, file lawsuits, but they couldn't touch the part of me that knew how to build. So that night, I got up. I went into the storage room, cleared off my whiteboard, and started again from scratch. Rebuild, rebrand, restart. I started small. I had a few $100s in liquid cash, barely enough for a single Facebook ad run. So instead, I went organic. Reddit, Instagram Reels, TikTok snippets. I rebranded my best-selling product under a different name, with a cleaner aesthetic and a more personal voice. I built a new Shopify store using a VPN and a fresh business LLC in another state. I stayed up until 3 a.m. every night. Made calls, wrote copy, learned more about web optimization in 3 weeks than I had in the previous year. And it started to work. Slowly, quietly, but it worked. My DMs filled with customers asking where the old brand went and thanking me when I responded personally. One of them was a YouTuber who ended up featuring the product in a review. That review blew up. Orders tripled in a week. Meanwhile, the lawsuit stalled. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss. Their team tried to amend it. The judge pushed hearings out another month. Then another. That gave me time. Time to recover. Time to prepare. Because while they were busy spinning fairy tales about how I'd stolen the future Aaron was supposed to have, I was busy collecting receipts. Not just business receipts, family receipts. The tax records I mentioned? Those weren't easy to get, but they were real. My grandmother, before she passed, had sent me a manila envelope of her own, back when she still lived alone. Inside were copies of the trust she'd set up after Grandpa died. And here's the kicker. Aaron had gotten a payout. A large one. Enough to pay off his college loans, start a business, or buy a house. But he didn't. He blew it. Gambling, bars, trips, crypto scams, all gone within a year. And he knew that. My parents knew that. But they never expected me to find out. I also found an old voicemail from Grandma. She left it a few weeks before she passed. Her voice was frail but clear. I hope you're doing well, Carl. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. I wish the others saw what I see. Keep going. And remember, don't let them guilt you into saving people who never tried to save themselves. I played that message on repeat the night I got it transcribed for evidence. Because now I had motive. Now I had proof. The tides were turning. But I didn't tell anyone. I stayed quiet. Kept building. I moved my entire operation into a friend's garage temporarily. He ran a coffee roasting business and let me use his backroom for shipping. I went invisible for a while. No posts. No updates. Not even to extended family. I let them think I was losing. Let them tell stories about how the truth was catching up to me. And all the while, I was watching. Waiting. Preparing for the next phase. Because soon enough, the court date would arrive. And when it did, I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd dismantle everything they built. Not out of revenge, at least not entirely. But because some people only learn when you stop letting them write your story and hand them a copy of the real one. And trust me, I was writing every word. They didn't know I had the file. That's what made it so satisfying. The documents from Grandma's estate, the ones I found tucked inside that envelope she mailed before she passed, weren't just sentimental relics. They were a blueprint, a timeline, a receipt, the kind of thing my parents assumed would never see daylight. After all, Aaron had torched through that money before the ink on the check had dried. Who would remember? Who would care? Well, me. I scanned everything. Highlighted key figures. The trust fund, the disbursement details, the fact that Aaron had been given a $75,000 payout at age 22 under the condition it be used for long-term growth and development. My name? Nowhere on it. I hadn't received a penny. The best part? Grandma had handwritten a note on the back of the final page. Just 6 words in her cursive scrawl. Carl doesn't need it. He builds. 6 words that destroyed the entire narrative my parents had constructed. 6 words that turned Aaron's sob story into what it really was. An inheritance squandered, not stolen. A future he set on fire. But I didn't go public with it. Not yet. The lawsuit was still crawling forward. My parents' lawyer kept trying to push hearings back, which was fine by me. Every week that passed gave me time to grow stronger, and them more rope to hang themselves with. While they stalled, I started digging. Not just through legal records or bank statements. Through people. See, there's something interesting about small towns. People talk. Especially when you're polite. Especially when you're quiet. I reached out to an old neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, who used to live across from us growing up. She remembered everything. The day Aaron got the check. The brand new car that appeared in our driveway a week later. The parties. The screaming matches between him and my dad when the money ran out. She always said he'd waste it. Mrs. Delaney told me over tea. Your grandma. She wasn't blind, you know. She just didn't want to hurt your mom. I didn't even have to ask for a statement. She offered one. Word got around. Soon, I had a small file of messages, texts, even photos. Aaron in Vegas, champagne in hand. Aaron on a boat, tagged in an old college friend's Instagram post, holding a bottle of Grey Goose and flipping off the camera. The timestamps? All within the 12 months after Grandma's trust was paid out. It painted a picture. A loud, obnoxious, undeniable picture. But that wasn't the only angle I was working. I had one more card to play. One that took some finesse. The first person I called was Mr. Jenkins. He used to be our family accountant, back when my parents still filed their taxes properly. I hadn't seen him in years, but he remembered me instantly. Carl, you were the quiet one, right? The polite one. I need a favor, I said. I wasn't sure he'd agree. But then I told him what was happening, about the lawsuit, the restraining order, the accusations. He got quiet. Real quiet. They told me you stole from them, he said after a beat. Said you were hiding something big. But I didn't buy it. Why not? Because I did their taxes the year they got that trust distribution. Cheryl told me it was going toward Aaron's future. Seed money for a tech company, she said. I filed it under a gift transfer, just like she asked. Would you be willing to put that in writing? I asked. A pause. I'll do better, he said. I've still got the files. He sent them the next morning. Now I had proof from 3 directions: Grandma's trust documents, eyewitness testimony, and tax records showing Aaron received money they never disclosed during discovery. My lawyer nearly fell out of his chair when I handed him the file. They're cooked, Miles said, flipping through the pages. This isn't just a defense anymore. This is counterclaim material. I nodded. That's the plan. But I didn't want to just win. I wanted to change the narrative. So I started laying out something else. Something more public. I rebuilt my brand under a new name, different domain, different visuals, different everything. But this time, I leaned into the story. Not the lawsuit itself, just the broad strokes. Built from scratch, I wrote in the About page. Bootstrapped. No handouts. Every dollar earned the hard way. I never named names. I didn't have to. People knew. Old customers returned. New ones followed. Word spread. Someone started a Reddit thread about the rebrand, and it caught fire. This is how you bounce back, one comment read. This guy's work ethic is unreal. My email list tripled. Revenue rebounded. And I stayed quiet. Because I was still waiting for one more thing to fall into place. Aaron's next move. It came sooner than expected. I got a call from Miles one morning while I was packing orders. They filed an emergency motion, he said. For what? To freeze your personal assets. They're claiming you're hiding money. I should have been furious. I should have been panicking. Instead, I smiled. Let them try. See, while they'd been playing checkers, drunk on rage and entitlement, I'd been setting up the chessboard. Everything I owned was now protected under a new LLC. The house, transferred to a trust. The car, leased under the business. Even my savings were split between 2 accounts, both under separate holding companies. Miles laughed when he saw the paperwork. You've been busy. They taught me well, I said. Never trust anyone, not even family. We countered the motion with everything. The tax records, the trust documents, the timeline, Mrs. Delaney's letter, Mr. Jenkins's statement, a full audit trail of my business's growth, from the day I started selling phone accessories out of my dorm room to the day I bought my house. It was surgical and devastating, but still, I wasn't done. Because here's the thing about people like Aaron and my parents. They don't just want money. They want control, the power to shape the story, the ability to say, you owe us, and have everyone believe it. So I planned one final move. Something public, something permanent. I scheduled a podcast interview, just a small one, run by a fellow entrepreneur I'd met years ago. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't viral, but it was honest. For an hour, I told my story. Not the lawsuit. Not the revenge. The real story. I talked about growing up in the shadow of someone who could do no wrong. About building a business at night while the rest of my family laughed me off. About paying off student loans with side hustle money. About the power of being underestimated. Sometimes, I said, the hardest part isn't starting from nothing. It's starting from behind, when the people who should have supported you were the ones holding you back. The episode aired a week later. The response was overwhelming. DMs, emails, comments from strangers saying they saw themselves in my words. People who'd been cut down by their own families. People who'd had to fight for every inch. But more than that, people started asking questions. Questions about the lawsuit. Questions my parents weren't ready to answer. Their lawyer called Miles in a panic. We'd like to revisit settlement discussions, he said. We're not interested, Miles replied. Because now it was too late. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was setting the terms. The next hearing was coming fast. And I was ready. Not just with evidence. Not just with allies. But with the unshakable truth that no matter how many times they tried to rewrite my story, I still held the pen. And soon, I'd use it. To end theirs. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not physically, no. It was that sterile, stiff kind of cold. The one you feel in your spine when you know something irreversible is about to happen. The walls were beige, the lighting fluorescent. Nothing dramatic. No pounding music. Just the hum of tension as everyone took their place. It had been 9 months since they first filed the lawsuit. 9 months since my parents and my golden child brother Aaron decided I owed them the life he had squandered. 9 months of venomous texts, weaponized family gossip, and pathetic attempts to destroy everything I'd built on my own since I was 18. And now it was time. Their side looked rattled. Aaron sat next to their attorney in a wrinkled suit he didn't know how to wear, chewing the inside of his cheek like he was trying to disappear into his seat. My parents were behind him, both dressed like they were attending a church fundraiser, mom in pearls and pastel, dad stiff in a blazer that didn't quite fit around his stomach anymore. They refused to look at me. I was calm, not because I wasn't nervous. I was. But it was a strange, quiet calm. The kind you only get when you've spent months preparing for a moment with such surgical precision. There's nothing left to panic about. Everything had already been set in motion. My lawyer, Miles, shuffled papers beside me. He leaned over and whispered, "This is going to be fun." The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s, called everyone to order. The hearing began with their lawyer laying out the same tired argument, that I had unfairly benefited from family resources, that I'd misled my parents into believing I was self-made, that Aaron's life had been derailed because I hoarded financial assets that rightfully should have been shared. The words sounded so desperate, so hollow. And then it was our turn. Miles stood. No theatrics. No shouting. Just facts. "Your Honor," he began, "we'll be demonstrating 3 things. First, that my client, Carl, received no financial support or inheritance from his family. Second, that the plaintiff's son, Aaron, received a $75,000 disbursement from a family trust, which he irresponsibly spent. And third, that this lawsuit is a malicious attempt to extract funds from my client under false pretenses after the plaintiffs failed to control their own finances or their son." Then he dropped the folder. Hard. Exhibit A, the trust documents from Grandma, clearly stating that the money was for Aaron and only Aaron. My name was never mentioned. Exhibit B, the notarized letter from Mr. Jenkins, their former accountant, confirming he filed that gift as a trust distribution with explicit instructions from my mother. Exhibit C, a timeline of Aaron's social media posts, travel logs, and online purchases, everything from designer sneakers to bottle service in Miami, lining up perfectly with the 12 months following the trust payout. Exhibit D, a recorded voicemail from Grandma herself, authenticated and transcribed, in which she said, in no uncertain terms, "Carl doesn't need it. He builds." The courtroom went still. My parents' lawyer tried to object. The judge overruled. The facts stood. Then came the final blow. Miles pulled out the spreadsheet. "Your Honor, we've also prepared a breakdown of my client's business growth over the past 4 years. All of it is verifiable, from his dorm room operation, to the first product launch, to the Shopify sales records. Every dollar, every invoice, every tax return. There's no missing money, no hidden assets. Just a young man who worked hard and succeeded without help." He paused. "Meanwhile, we have evidence that the plaintiffs and their son have consistently misrepresented their financial situation to multiple parties, including their mortgage lender and this court." The judge raised an eyebrow, and Miles smiled. "Which is why we're also filing a counterclaim for defamation, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress." I'll never forget what happened next. The judge leaned back in her chair, took off her glasses, and looked directly at my parents. "I've presided over a lot of family cases," she said, voice calm but cold. "But this is one of the more cynical attempts I've seen to weaponize the legal system against a relative for personal gain. Based on the evidence presented, I'm dismissing all claims against Mr. Davis with prejudice." Boom. Done. But she wasn't finished. "As for the counterclaim," she continued, "Mr. Davis is within his rights to pursue damages. And frankly, I believe he has a case." Their lawyer's face went pale. Aaron just sat there, frozen, like a deer in headlights. My mom blinked rapidly, her hands fidgeting with her wedding ring. My dad's face flushed red with something between rage and humiliation. But none of them said a word. Not one. We walked out in silence. Once we were in the hallway, Miles turned to me. "They'll settle. Trust me. They can't afford not to." And they did. 2 weeks later, their lawyer reached out with an offer. They'd cover all my legal fees, issue a written apology drafted by us, and drop any rights to future legal action if I dropped the counterclaim. I didn't agree. Not yet. Because there was one more thing I needed. Truth. I had the apology published, not buried in a private letter or hidden behind legal jargon. I made sure it went public, as a formal statement on my business website, shared in an open letter on LinkedIn, and even featured in the same small podcast that had sparked the first wave of support. The truth had to be visible, not for revenge. For record, I didn't want money from them. I wanted accountability. The day the statement went live, I received over 200 emails. Strangers, friends, former classmates, even a few old teachers, all saying the same thing. Thank you for telling the truth. As for Aaron, he disappeared from social media. Word spread that he'd left town, maybe moved in with a cousin 2 states over. His name became something whispered in our hometown, not spoken with admiration, but with embarrassment. And my parents? They lost most of their inner circle. People they used to gossip with now crossed the street to avoid them. Mrs. Delaney said they stopped showing up to church altogether. No more neighborhood BBQs. No more pretending. They didn't just lose the case. They lost the story. Because I reclaimed it. In the months that followed, my business doubled in size. I expanded to 2 new product lines, hired a small team, and launched a mentorship program for underprivileged students trying to start their own ventures. I called it the Builder's Fund. I knew Grandma would have liked that. One day, maybe I'll forgive them. But not yet. Because forgiveness is earned. And they never even tried. They thought they could take what I built. They didn't realize. I am what I built. My name's Nate. I'm 34, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that being the reliable one in the family comes with a price tag, and not just a financial one. For most of my adult life, I've been the guy they call when the rent's due early or the car won't start or someone accidentally spent their utility money on a spontaneous trip to Miami. And like a fool, I'd show up. I'd wire the money. I'd help fix the mess. Because I thought that's what family did. So when my little sister Emily got engaged last year, I was genuinely happy for her. She's 27, bright, creative, and the golden child. Even if she's never held a job longer than 6 months and once said, completely seriously, that bills are a social construct. She met her fiancé, Caleb, at a mutual friend's party, and within 3 months they were talking wedding venues. My parents were over the moon. My mom gushed about the perfect match, while my dad was already showing Caleb the ropes on grilling and lawn maintenance like he was prepping him for a suburban Olympics. Here's where it gets complicated. I offered to help pay for the wedding. Not in a hey, I'll chip in sort of way. No, this was a full, I've got the venue, catering, and flowers covered kind of offer. I didn't do it for show. I just knew my parents were already strained financially, and Emily had champagne taste on a Capri Sun budget. She cried when I told her. Said I was the best big brother ever. Caleb even shook my hand like we'd just closed $1 million deal. For a moment, I felt included, valued. Like maybe, after all the years of being the family's emotional and financial support beam, they actually saw me. The wedding was planned for early June. By March, deposits had been made, meetings scheduled, and I had the invoices piling up to prove I wasn't just tossing cash. I was coordinating, fielding calls, chasing down vendors. And all this while working a full-time job. Emily, meanwhile, was doing a lot of vision boarding on Pinterest and changing her mind on flower arrangements like she was flipping through radio stations. Caleb? He was mostly just vibing, which is generous, considering he once asked me if peonies were a kind of cheese. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text. A text from my mom. Hey Nate, just a heads up, Emily and Caleb think it might be best if you don't come to the wedding. He feels like you being there might make things awkward. I stared at it for a good minute, waiting for the punchline. Nothing. No call. No explanation. Just a little electronic gut punch with a smiley face at the end, like she was telling me they were out of almond milk. I didn't answer right away. I didn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. So I waited, breathed, reread the message until the words blurred. Then, finally, I typed back. Funny, I was the one paying for awkward. No one replied. That was Thursday. By Friday morning, I'd made my decision. I started with the venue. I'd booked it under my name. Paid the deposit. When I called the coordinator and told her the situation, that I was no longer welcome at the event I was paying for, her silence was almost comical. I could tell she was torn between professional neutrality and the very human urge to say, "Are you kidding me? Would you like to cancel the reservation?" she asked gently. No, I said. Not yet. I'd like to pause everything. Let's hold off on the catering confirmations, too. I'll be in touch. Then I called the florist. Same story. The woman on the phone actually gasped. They uninvited you? She asked, like I'd just told her my family replaced me with a golden retriever. Apparently, I'd make it awkward, I said flatly. By Sunday, the group chat was lighting up. Not with concern, mind you, but with logistical panic. Emily messaged first. Hey, so the florist said something about things being on hold? Can you just confirm you're still good for everything? Caleb's parents are asking. No apology. No explanation. Just a casual segue into assuming I'd still be footing the bill like a good little credit card with legs. I didn't answer. Monday, my dad called. That was rare. He's not a talk feelings kind of guy, more the fix it or ignore it type. Nate, he said, with that practice sigh that made everything sound like my fault. Look, your sister's under a lot of pressure, and Caleb's just trying to make sure things go smoothly. Maybe you can come to the reception. No hard feelings, right? No hard feelings? I repeated, blinking. I've been planning and paying for this wedding for 6 months. They kicked me off the guest list like I'm the weird coworker they felt obligated to invite. And you want me to just shrug and write the check? Son, don't be dramatic. I hung up. And that, apparently, was the spark. Because the next day, Emily sent a message that read more like a legal notice. If you're going to be petty about this, just say so. We still need the vendors confirmed. I hope you're not planning to mess everything up over one little misunderstanding. One little misunderstanding. I stared at that phrase like it was in bold neon letters. As if being told I wasn't welcome at the wedding I was financing was a minor hiccup, like forgetting to RSVP or showing up late. So I made another round of calls. The venue? Canceled. The deposit? Non-refundable, but I didn't care. Catering? Pulled the plug. Flowers? Same deal. Each vendor offered the same mixture of sympathy and disbelief. One of them even said, "You're handling this way better than I would." I wasn't sure I was handling it well at all. My hands were shaking after the last call. Not from anger, from hurt. The kind of hurt that bubbles up when you realize the people closest to you don't actually see you. They just see what you can offer. I didn't post anything. I didn't warn them. I let the silence build. And then the real show started. The next morning, my phone buzzed so hard it slid off the counter. Missed calls. Dozens. From Mom. From Emily. From Caleb. Even Caleb's mom, whose number I didn't even have saved. I didn't answer any of them. But I did open one message, from Emily. It just said, "What did you do?" What did I do? I stopped being the ATM. I stopped letting people walk over me while smiling and calling it love. But of course, that wasn't how they saw it. Because within minutes, the group chat lit up like a bonfire of entitlement. My mom chimed in first, typing like she was giving a press conference. "Nathan, you're making a scene. It's not too late to fix this. Just call the vendors and tell them it was a mistake. We'll still let you attend, if you're willing to apologize." Let me attend? Let me? Like I was some distant cousin trying to crash the buffet. Then Caleb added, "You're being really immature, man. This is Emily's big day, not about whatever grudge you're nursing. Be an adult." I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes, not from rage, but from that quiet sting of betrayal that sits under your skin and pulses like a bruise. A grudge? I opened the message field, typed out a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Nothing felt right. Or rather, everything felt too generous. So instead, I screenshotted their texts. All of them. And saved them. Just in case. Then I went for a walk. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't shout. It whispers. It creeps in slowly, disguising itself as jokes you let slide, jabs you pretend didn't sting, expectations you meet even when they're absurd. And then, one day, you wake up and realize that somewhere along the way, you stopped being a person to them. You became a resource, a sponsor, background noise. That walk turned into an hour, then 2. I sat on a bench near the lake and watched families feed ducks, kids run around chasing bubbles, couples bicker softly over sandwich choices. Life moved on, calmly, indifferently. And for once, I let myself be outside the storm. When I got back home, I had a voicemail from my aunt, the one who always took Emily's side because she's just sensitive. "I don't know what's going on, Nate, but whatever it is, you need to fix it. Your mom's in tears, Emily's a wreck, and the whole family's embarrassed. She's your sister. You don't blow up her wedding over feelings." Feelings. The way they said that word like it was a dirty thing. And then came the kicker, the text that made something inside me finally snap. It was from Emily. I shouldn't have to explain why you'd be a bad fit at the wedding. You've always made things about you. This day is supposed to be about love, not tension. Caleb just wants it to be peaceful. If you ever cared about me, you'd do the right thing. I must have read that line 10 times. If you ever cared about me. As if I hadn't spent years stepping in to cover her mistakes. Picking up the financial slack when she maxed out her cards. Letting her crash at my place when she and our parents fought. Taking her calls at 3 a.m. when she thought Caleb was cheating. And no, she didn't seem to remember that detail while defending his honor now. So I finally responded. Just 5 words. Tell Caleb to pay up. No emoji. No punctuation. Just that. The silence afterward was delicious. Like a moment of calm before the thunder. I imagined the look on her face reading it. The slow dawning horror of what it meant. Because here's what they hadn't thought through. Everything was in my name. The venue. The food. The flowers. The DJ. Even the backup photographer they wanted just in case. They'd let me run the logistics so they could focus on colors and hashtags. And now, they were holding a wedding with no location, no meal, no music, and no centerpieces. But the best part? They'd already printed the invitations, sent out the RSVPs, bragged to everyone about how elegant and Pinterest-worthy the whole thing was going to be. And now, with 2 weeks to go, they were scrambling. Over the next few days, I got messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins, distant relatives, a couple of Emily's friends who used to flirt with me in college before I became just Nate. They all had the same angle, some variation of, hey, man, what's going on? Heard there's drama. You okay? Followed by, I mean, it is kind of a big deal, the wedding and all. Think you'll come around? I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back and watched the digital dominoes fall. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. From my mother. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A full, unfiltered call. Her voice was tight, brittle, like glass about to shatter. Nathan, I don't know what kind of point you think you're making, but this is not how family treats each other. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. You're humiliating us. Emily's beside herself. Do you want her to have a breakdown right before the happiest day of her life? Still silent. Nathan, say something. I finally exhaled. You told me I wasn't invited. That was a misunderstanding. Caleb was. You agreed with him. I didn't think you'd take it so personally. And that was it. That line. That one line. Like I was the unreasonable one for not smiling while they erased me from my own generosity. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Caleb tried calling. I didn't answer. Then a text. We'll pay you back. Just give us time. But time wasn't what they needed. They needed a mirror. And I had every intention of holding it up. Because what came next? Oh, that was going to be the real wedding surprise. The next few days were pure chaos. Not for me, but for everyone else. I spent most of that week in quiet peace, going to work, grabbing coffee, hitting the gym, even reading for fun, something I hadn't done in months. But I kept my phone on, not because I wanted to respond, but because I wanted to see. I wanted to witness what happened when people finally realized the bridge they burned was the one holding up their perfect day. By Thursday, Emily's Instagram went on lockdown. The wedding planner had apparently quit when it became clear they couldn't pay the balance. Caleb's mom started calling around to her friends, begging for any connections to last-minute venues, which, in early June, good luck with that. The only things left were outdoor gardens or restaurants with plastic chairs and sticky menus. Then came the real gem, a group email. A mass message that I wasn't supposed to see but got forwarded to me anyway by my cousin Tori, who was always secretly rooting for me even though she played nice with the family facade. The subject line? Urgent. Help save Emily's wedding. And the email? A long, dramatic plea about how unforeseen issues caused some of the vendors to fall through, and how the bride and groom were trying to pull together a miracle with limited funds. It ended with a link to a crowdfunding page titled Support Emily's Dream Wedding and a suggested donation of $250 per guest. I laughed out loud when I saw it. No explanation, no accountability, just digital panhandling with a pretty bow on it. The page raised $90 in the first day. Half of that was from someone named Caleb's coworker who left early. By Friday, things started unraveling publicly. Caleb's best man posted something vague but sharp. Crazy how some people will build your wedding, then blow it up because they weren't the center of attention. Some folks got real villain origin stories. I didn't respond. But again, Tori did. In the comments, she just said, "You mean the guy who paid for everything and then got kicked off the guest list? That villain." 12 likes and one this you. GIF later, the thread was deleted. That night, my dad finally broke his silence. I came home to a voicemail I had to replay twice just to fully absorb the audacity. "Nate, this has gone far enough. You've made your point, okay? We get it. But you're punishing everyone, not just Emily. Think about the family. Think about what you're doing to your mother." That line hit me harder than it should have. What you're doing to your mother. As if I hadn't spent the last decade trying to please my mother. As if I hadn't been the one silently fixing things while she praised Emily for every minor adulting task, like it was Nobel Prize material. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to that message on repeat. I wanted to scream. Instead, I pulled up the saved screenshots of all the texts, the ones where they told me not to come, where they accused me of being immature, selfish, dramatic. And then, I drafted an email. Not to them, to everyone else. Every guest invited to the wedding. Tori helped me compile the list. She had access to the invite. Emily had bragged about using her as a planning assistant before she got cut out of the final decisions. I spent half the night writing, rewriting, and then finally hit send around 2 a.m. It wasn't angry. It wasn't vengeful. It was just honest. Subject line, "Why I won't be at Emily's wedding." The body of the email was straightforward. I explained that I had funded the majority of the event as a gift, only to be told I was no longer welcome because I might make things awkward. I detailed how I had quietly withdrawn my support, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I made it clear I wasn't asking for sympathy, just clarity. And then I closed it with a single sentence. "I hope the wedding goes beautifully, and that next time, people remember who was really standing behind the curtain making the show happen." I didn't expect much. Maybe a few polite responses. Maybe some unsubscribes. But by noon the next day, my inbox looked like a live chat room. 37 replies. Most of them supportive. A few apologetic. Some shocked. 2 guests said they'd be skipping the wedding entirely. One guy, Caleb's cousin apparently, said he wished he'd had the guts to do what I did when his sister pulled something similar years ago. But the best part? Someone forwarded me Emily's reply email. She blasted me. Said I was vindictive, bitter, and emotionally manipulative. Claimed I was always jealous of her happiness and that I waited for the perfect moment to ruin her life. She accused me of turning the family against her for attention and ended the email with, "You've made sure no one will forget you. I hope you're proud." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because less than 24 hours later, Emily's wedding day arrived. And so did something else. Something she never saw coming. Emily's wedding day dawned warm and cloudless. Picture perfect, at least from the outside. A few of her friends still posted filtered stories early that morning. Group selfies in pastel robes, champagne flutes in hand, captions like, "She's getting married," and "Time to celebrate love ring bouquet." But if you looked closely, you'd see the cracks. There were no shots of the venue, no flower arrangements, no beautiful wide-angle tables with place cards and crystal, just close-ups, cropped, tight, desperate. By 10 a.m., the ceremony location had shifted to a public park on the outskirts of town, the only place they could book with less than 48 hours' notice. No one mentioned that in the captions, of course. But the folding chairs on slightly uneven grass and the beige pop-up tent Caleb's dad brought from his garage said plenty. I didn't go. Of course I didn't go. Instead, I got a text from Tori, who did attend. Out of loyalty? Curiosity? Probably both. She didn't say much, just sent a photo with a message. They're calling it an intimate rustic vibe. The DJ's a Bluetooth speaker. I stared at the image for a long while. Emily looked stunning, I'll admit that. Hair flawless. Makeup professionally done. Dress tailored to perfection. Likely paid for by our parents, who by now were quietly seething under their polite smiles. But what got me wasn't the aesthetics. It was the look in her eyes. Tight. Shaky. Not the glowing joy of a bride surrounded by love. More like someone bracing for impact and pretending they weren't. Later that afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It turned out to be Caleb. His voice was stiff, controlled, like someone holding a smile in place with sheer force. "Hey man, just wanted to say I regret how everything went down. We should have handled it differently. I think maybe we let some stuff get in our heads that shouldn't have. But, just wanted to say no hard feelings. Hope we can, move past it. I didn't return the call, because the truth was, I had already moved past it. I spent that evening with a couple of friends, grilling on the patio, sipping a cold beer, and laughing about something so dumb I don't even remember what it was. What I do remember is how peaceful it felt, how different it was from every family gathering I'd ever attended. No tension, no forced smiles, no waiting for someone to make a snide comment and someone else to pretend they didn't hear it. Just silence, where the noise used to be. But the fallout from that wedding lasted long after the cake had been cut, or rather, the cupcakes they picked up last minute from a grocery store after the baker canceled on them for non-payment. 2 days later, my mom showed up at my apartment. I didn't open the door. She knocked for almost 10 minutes. "Nathan, I know you're home. Please, let's talk." Eventually, she gave up and left a note in the mailbox. Folded paper. No envelope. Just 6 words scribbled in her familiar cursive. "This isn't what family does." I almost laughed, because that's exactly what family does. Our family, anyway. They push and pull and take in guilt. And when you finally say, enough, they act like you're the problem. The next week, I got a call from my father. His voice was harder now. No more fake diplomacy. "You embarrassed your sister. You embarrassed us. You think this was revenge? That's not strength, Nathan. That's spite." He didn't wait for a reply. Just hung up. But the thing is, it wasn't spite. If I'd wanted to be cruel, I could have made it much worse. I could have canceled everything the morning of, left them high and dry mid-setup. I could have posted screenshots of the texts, aired their hypocrisy publicly. But I didn't. I gave them weeks of warning. They just never thought the hammer would actually fall. In their minds, I was the one who didn't show up. But really, I'd been showing up for years, cleaning their messes, swallowing my pride, pretending it didn't hurt when they laughed at me, dismissed me, took me for granted. The only thing I didn't show up for was the final act of the show they'd built on my back. And the funny part? That decision sparked a domino effect they never saw coming. A month after the wedding, I got a message from my uncle, my mom's brother. We weren't particularly close, but we'd always been on good terms. His message was short. "Hey, heard what happened. Just wanted to say you were right. That took guts. Hope you're doing well." Then a week after that, my cousin Jules messaged me out of the blue. She hadn't spoken to Emily in years, some old falling out over a bridesmaid snub, but apparently, she'd seen the group email and forwarded it to a few others. Word got around, and slowly, a few extended family members began to reach out. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly, respectfully, like they were testing the water. It wasn't validation I needed. It wasn't some long-awaited parade of apologies. But it was a reminder I wasn't crazy. And more importantly, I wasn't alone. As for Emily and Caleb, they went on a mini-moon to a lakeside cabin that looked suspiciously like his cousin's Airbnb listing. Photos were sparse, captions more muted. No grand, "Thank you to our wonderful family" posts. No montage videos. Just a few awkward selfies and a short post from Emily that read, "Not everything goes according to plan. But at the end of the day, love is all you need, 2 hearts. Love and, apparently, several $1,000s and a brother willing to be treated like dirt." By the end of the summer, I'd quietly distanced myself from the rest of the family. No more weekend visits. No more birthday gifts. I pulled myself off the emergency contact list for my mom's prescriptions. I shut down the shared Netflix account. When my sister tried to tag me in an old throwback photo with the caption, "At least we used to get along," pensive face, I blocked her. Completely. And it was like a weight lifted off my chest. Because I finally understood that you don't owe anyone a seat at your table just because you were born in the same house. Blood isn't a debt. Kindness isn't a contract. And loyalty isn't slavery. They wanted to erase me from the picture, but they forgot I was the one holding the camera. And when I walked away, the whole thing went out of focus. So yeah, I didn't attend the wedding. But in the end, I didn't miss a thing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. My name's Adam. I'm 34. And if you ask my family, they'd probably tell you I'm the quiet one, the one who got lucky, the one who doesn't say much but always pays the bill. And for a long time, I let that be true. I've always been low-key, head down, work hard, don't stir the pot. But on my last birthday, something snapped. And I finally realized just how much they took that silence for granted. I'll back up a bit. I run my own business, nothing flashy, mostly commercial real estate. It took me a while to build up, and while it started out of desperation after being laid off in my 20s, I stuck with it. Now it does well. Really well. Enough that I don't worry about money anymore. And enough that, about 5 years ago, I started helping my family out in ways they never really acknowledged but always expected. My parents' mortgage? I quietly started covering it when my dad's health declined and their savings ran out. My older brother, Matt? I co-signed his refinance to keep him from losing his house during his second divorce. My younger sister? I covered her tuition when her scholarship fell through. And I never held it over them. Never asked for thanks. Honestly, I didn't mind. I figured we were family. That's what you do. But lately, things have felt different. It started subtly. Missed calls, canceled plans, birthdays remembered late or not at all. I brushed it off as life getting busy. Then came the excuses. Oh, we didn't think you'd want to come. It was last minute. You're always working anyway. But the truth? They just stopped including me. And yet, the bills kept coming. Can you spot us this month? The furnace went out. We're tight right now, just for a bit. And still, I kept paying. This year, for my 34th birthday, I wanted to do something nice. Not extravagant, just special. I made a reservation at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for a while. One of those places that makes you feel like it's okay to celebrate yourself. I booked a private table for 10. Sent a group message to my parents, my siblings, a couple cousins. Nothing dramatic, just, would love to see you all. My treat. My mom responded with a thumbs up. My sister said, sounds good. Matt left it on read. I should have known, honestly. The day of the dinner came, and I got ready, put on the nice watch I rarely wear, and showed up a little early, nerves buzzing. I even asked the waiter to hold off bringing drinks until everyone arrived. 5 minutes passed, then 15. At 30 minutes, I checked my phone. One by one, the messages rolled in. Sorry, something came up. Rain check? Can't make it. Traffic's crazy. Kids not feeling well? And then Matt. No excuse. Just, no one cares. It's just you. I stared at that message for a while. At first, I thought it was a joke. Matt was always blunt. But this? It felt like something more. Cold. Intentional. And what got me the most wasn't the words. It was the fact that, deep down, I wasn't even surprised. I just sat there, alone at a table meant for 10, while a waiter tried not to make eye contact and a couple at the next table whispered, probably wondering what sad story brought a guy to dine alone with 10 empty chairs and a birthday candle waiting to be lit. I stayed for another 10 minutes, ordered a drink, then quietly paid the bill, yes, for all 10 seats, and walked out. Not angry, not crying, just empty. Like I had finally hit the end of something I didn't even know I'd been dragging behind me. I got in the car, sat for a bit, and scrolled through the family group chat. My dad had just sent a meme. My sister was laughing in the comments. No one mentioned the dinner. No one asked if I was okay. That's when it clicked. They didn't forget. They didn't miss it. They just didn't care. Because they assumed I'd always be there. That I'd always pay. Always forgive. Always smile through it. That's when I sent the text. One line. No exclamation point. No anger. Just, let's see how you celebrate without a mortgage. Then I turned off my phone. What they didn't know, what I'd kept quiet about for years, was that every payment I made, every dime I covered, was traceable. Not just traceable, documented. My name was on the accounts. I had power of attorney for my parents, co-ownership of the refinance agreement for Matt, and my sister's tuition was through an education trust once set up under my business. Quiet power. Paper trails. Legal leverage. I hadn't touched it because I never wanted to use it. But that night, as I sat alone in my apartment with the city lights flickering through the window, I opened my laptop, logged into every account, and began. By morning, the mortgage auto payments were canceled. The trust was frozen. The refinance contract was triggered to full repayment terms. The shared family Spotify account? Gone. The Amazon Prime they all piggybacked off of? Canceled. I didn't even feel guilty. Just clear. For the first time in years, my generosity didn't feel like a quiet burden. It felt like power. At 6:12 a.m., the voicemail started. First my mom. Sweetie, something's wrong with the mortgage account. Can you check? Then my dad. Hey, I think we got hacked. Then my sister. Are you awake? My card's getting declined and finally, Matt. No greeting. Just, you're being dramatic. Fix it. And I didn't answer. I didn't even listen to the rest. I just let the messages pile up, one after another. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar creeping up my spine. Not guilt, not regret. Something sharper. Freedom. And just when I thought they might finally understand what they had done, just when I thought the silence might settle in long enough for them to really feel it, my phone lit up with one more notification. A message from Matt. And it said, "Wow, you're really going to do this to your own family over some dinner party pity tantrum? Grow up." I stared at it. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity had reached a point where it was almost impressive. There it was, in black and white, the unshakable belief that no matter what they did, I owed them. That my silence meant submission. That being the quiet one also meant being the doormat. I didn't reply. I just put the phone down and made myself breakfast. Bacon, eggs, the works. Played music on my speakers, brewed coffee in silence. It was weird how calm I felt. Like a fog had finally lifted. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. I hadn't realized how much of my energy was spent managing their messes, waiting for the next ask, the next guilt trip. Now, nothing. Just quiet. Around noon, I opened my email. That's when the panic started trickling in. First, a message from my parents' bank. My dad had tried to reset the auto payment settings and called the branch when he couldn't. He hadn't realized that I had full control as power of attorney. They wouldn't let him make changes without my sign-off. The email was polite but clear. They needed to speak with me. Then one from the college bursar's office. My sister's tuition payment had bounced. Her spring semester balance was flagged for collections if not paid in the next 10 business days. The trust I'd set up had been their safety net, and now it was frozen, locked until I chose to reopen it. And then, this one really got me, a message from Matt's mortgage company. Because I was still listed as a co-borrower, any changes to the agreement had to go through me. And without my income factored in, his refinancing terms would collapse. Fast. They were strongly recommending immediate resolution. They were unraveling. Fast. That night, my mom called 6 times. Then my dad. Then both of them on speaker. I didn't answer. I didn't feel the need to. I sat in the dark, sipping whiskey, listening to the quiet hum of the city and watching their names pop up and disappear. And then, at around 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from my mom that just said, "Please." I still didn't respond. Because I realized something, sitting there in that quiet apartment, that please wasn't about me. It wasn't about understanding, or regret, or even love. It was desperation. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were just scared of losing the things I provided. Scared that, maybe for the first time, their words didn't work anymore. 2 days passed. I took a long walk. Treated myself to a movie. Didn't answer a single call. By the 3rd morning, my voicemail inbox was full. I checked a few just for curiosity. My dad, trying to sound firm but clearly unraveling. "Adam, this is ridiculous. You've made your point. Now let's fix this." Matt, sounding like he was recording it mid-rage troll. "You seriously think you're better than us now? You think you can just walk away from your family? You're pathetic." My sister, near tears. "I might get dropped from school, Adam. I don't have anyone else. Please, just talk to me." And that's when I finally replied. Not a call. Just a single message in the family group chat. All I asked was for one dinner. Silence. Then another message. "You made your priorities clear. Now I'm making mine." That was it. Nothing more. I left it at that. But the real shift happened later that night. I got a text, not from my family, but from someone I hadn't expected. My cousin Rachel. We'd always been cool, but she mostly kept to herself. She wasn't part of the mortgage mess or the tuition trust. She wrote, "Hey, I know things are crazy right now, but I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't know how much they were leaning on you. I should have shown up to that dinner. That was wrong. Let me know if you ever want to get lunch." It wasn't dramatic, just real. And for the first time, I felt seen. I texted back, told her I appreciated it. We set a time for that weekend. As for the rest of them, the silence grew louder. They stopped calling as much, though I'd still get the occasional guilt text from my mom or a passive-aggressive meme from Matt. But I didn't budge. The payments remained canceled. The locks on my financial boundaries stayed changed. And slowly, the balance of power shifted. One evening, maybe a week after the birthday, I walked past the restaurant where I'd sat alone. Same table was set for 10. Someone else's celebration now. And I realized something important. You can't force people to value you. But you can stop funding their disrespect. And that's when my phone buzzed again. Another call. Another voicemail. This time, it wasn't begging. It was a threat. Matt's voice, low and sharp. You think this is over? You think you can just mess us over and walk away? You have no idea what you've started. I listened to the message twice. Then I hit save. Because if they wanted to escalate, I was done being the quiet one. I didn't respond to Matt's voicemail. Not right away. I wanted to, but I knew better. You don't interrupt someone while they're digging their own grave. Let them tire themselves out. Let them show you just how ugly they're willing to get. Then you make your move. 3 days passed before I heard from him again. I assumed maybe he'd cooled off. Maybe they all had. I was wrong. It was a Friday afternoon when I stepped out of a client meeting and found my phone lighting up with notifications, texts, voicemails, and one email with the subject line, "Legal action pending." My heart didn't even skip a beat. I just stood on the sidewalk, pulled out my phone, and opened the email. It was from some low-budget local attorney Matt must have scraped up. The kind of guy who still used AOL and typed in all caps. The message was full of bluster, accusations that I had fraudulently seized control of family finances, that I was causing emotional and financial harm, and that if I didn't reinstate all payments within 48 hours, they'd be forced to pursue civil remedy. I almost laughed. It was so sloppy, so desperate. And yet, there was something about it that twisted in my stomach. Not fear. Disgust. Because I realized, with crystal clarity, that this wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. It wasn't even about family. This was about entitlement and punishment. Matt thought if he threw enough threats at me, I'd break. Like always. I didn't. Instead, I forwarded the email to my lawyer, Brian. Brian's the type of guy who doesn't blink. I've known him since I incorporated my first company. He reviewed the message, chuckled over the phone, and said, "Adam, this guy's barking with a paper leash. You've done everything by the book. If anything, we could sue them for harassment." I thanked him and hung up. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: pity. Matt was unraveling in real time. And he wasn't alone. My mom had started calling again too, this time with a syrupy voice, pretending nothing had happened. She left a voicemail saying she was worried about me, asking if I was okay mentally, and then softly dropping the phrase, "You know, Dad's health has been rocky lately. We could really use your support again." Right. Support. That old favorite word. Then came the Facebook posts. Matt posted a status. Funny how money changes people. One day they're your brother, the next they're your bank. And when the bank closes, you see the truth. My sister commented under it with a broken heart emoji. My mom shared it with a caption about loving your children no matter what, even when they hurt you. They weren't trying to fix things. They were trying to control the narrative. Paint me as the selfish one, the villain, the one who turned his back on his family. And they knew I wouldn't defend myself publicly because I never had. They were counting on me staying silent. So I changed the rules. That night, I didn't post a long rant. I didn't name names. I simply shared a screenshot of my original group message, the birthday dinner invitation, dated and timestamped, and wrote, "I asked for one dinner." They asked for my life. Nothing more. The comments exploded. Friends, old classmates, even extended cousins started chiming in. "Wait, this is about that dinner? That's cold. Didn't even show up for his birthday and now they're crying for help?" People only remember who paid, not who paid attention. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The silence from my family after that post was louder than any voicemail. And then, something shifted. Rachel, my cousin, messaged me again. She'd seen the post. She wanted to meet for that lunch after all. We picked a quiet spot downtown, nothing fancy, just casual. When we sat down, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not crazy. You've been carrying them for years. And I think they're terrified that you finally put them down." I didn't expect that. I don't think I even realized how badly I needed someone, anyone, to say that out loud. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. She added, "They're trying to shame you into being useful again. But you don't owe them the pieces of yourself they broke." That line stuck with me. And it helped when, the next day, my dad finally called. He never called. Ever. When I picked up, there was a long pause before he said, "Hey, Adam." I waited. He sighed. "Your mother's in a state. Says you've gone cold. That you're punishing us. Is that true?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked calmly, "Did you know what Matt said about my birthday?" Another pause. He cleared his throat. "Matt says a lot of things." That's not an answer. He got defensive. "Look, your brother's going through a tough time. 2 divorces, child support, his business. And I've helped with all of that. Quietly. For years. I know, he said quickly. And we appreciate it. No, you don't. You expect it. And when I finally ask for one evening, a couple hours of acknowledgement, you all disappear. His voice got low, tired. We didn't think it was a big deal. Exactly. That was the point. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, I need time, Dad. And space. And you all need to figure out how to live without my credit card attached to your lives. He muttered something I didn't catch. Then, so that's it. For now, I said. Yeah. I hung up. And that should have been it. A pause. A silence. A reset. But it wasn't. Because the next morning, I got a notification from the refinance bank. Meta tried to remove me from the loan. Illegally. And now they were contacting me with documents, flagged transactions, and a warning. If this continues, we will be forced to pursue legal action against both parties. So Matt wanted to play hardball. Fine. He just forgot who paid for the gloves. I didn't get angry when I saw the bank's message. I didn't slam the laptop shut or start pacing the apartment like I might have in the past. I just sat still, read the message twice, then leaned back in my chair. The audacity wasn't surprising anymore. It was routine. But this time, Matt had crossed a legal line. He wasn't just lying or guilt-tripping or whining. He had tried to falsify documentation and remove me from a binding agreement that, legally, tied both of us to his mortgage. And I had receipts. Years of them. That night, I called Brian again. My lawyer didn't even sound surprised when I explained what happened. He tried to forge your signature? Brian asked. Tried. The bank flagged it before anything could go through. Brian exhaled slowly. Then it's not just fraud, it's attempted fraud. We can build a solid case here. You ready to go forward? I hesitated, not because I had doubts, but because I still, somewhere deep down, wished it hadn't come to this. This wasn't some random scammer. It was my brother, my family, people I grew up with. But over the past few years, especially this last month, they'd proven one thing consistently. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a wallet. And the second that wallet said no, they stopped pretending. I took a breath. Let's do it. Brian got to work. Within a week, he filed a cease and desist letter against Matt and his lawyer. The bank froze all activity on the refinance agreement pending an internal investigation. And once they saw the forged documents and compared them to the originals I had on file, signed, dated, notarized, they cut ties with Matt completely. The loan was voided. And because I had agreed to co-sign only under the premise of joint control, his attempt to remove me without consent was a breach of the agreement. In short, the bank pulled out. Fully. And they didn't just reassign the loan. They foreclosed. Matt lost the house. He tried calling me 12 times in one day. Left voicemails switching between rage, begging, insults, and finally, pathetic lines like, "You didn't have to go this far, man." But I never answered. I never replied. And I never felt guilty. Because I hadn't gone too far. I had only matched the distance he was willing to go when he thought I'd never push back. The fallout didn't stop with Matt. My parents were next. See, once Matt's mess made waves, it triggered a full financial domino effect. My parents had no backup plan. I had been covering their mortgage for so long they had forgotten how to budget without it. And when their automatic deductions stopped, their credit tanked. They started falling behind. Fast. I knew this not because they told me, but because I still had access to their account statements through the power of attorney they had signed years ago. They had handed me full control when Dad got sick, and they never revoked it. Now, as the bank sent warnings and late payment notices, I could see everything. They tried to sell their car, then their furniture. Then they started pulling small amounts from retirement, hoping to float just long enough for me to come around. I didn't. Instead, I drafted a formal letter through Brian, revoking my power of attorney and severing all legal and financial ties with them. I attached a detailed summary of the payments I had made over the years, mortgage, utilities, credit cards, even small things like groceries and medication, and wrote plainly, "This is what I gave. This is what I got in return. We're even now." I didn't mail it. I left it on their front doorstep, in a sealed envelope, with a copy of the birthday dinner invite tucked inside. 2 days later, I got a text from my mom. Just one word. Why? I didn't respond. But I did finally block their numbers. Not out of anger. Not even out of revenge. I did it for peace. I think that's what most people misunderstand about walking away. It's not always about getting back at someone. Sometimes, it's about preserving what little of yourself you have left. And I had given so much of myself, my time, my money, my silence, my energy, that I didn't even realize I was running on fumes. Until I stopped. And suddenly, I could breathe again. A month passed. Then two. Life got quiet. Blissfully so. I started going to the gym again. Reading more. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. I even started seeing someone who didn't know anything about the drama. Just someone who laughed at my jokes and listened when I talked and didn't expect anything more from me than my time and honesty. It felt strange. It felt real. But the real shift came on a random Thursday, while walking downtown, when I bumped into Rachel again. She was with a friend and introduced me with a grin. "This is Adam, the guy who finally stood up for himself." We laughed, but it stuck with me. That's who I had become. Not just the guy with the money. Not the quiet one. The guy who finally said enough. And that mattered more than anything. Matt, as far as I know, moved back in with an old college buddy and was trying to rebuild. My sister dropped out of school and took a job at a local boutique. My parents, well, I heard from a cousin that they're renting now, somewhere on the other side of town. I don't know the details. I don't want to, because I'm not their safety net anymore. And they're not my responsibility. My birthday this year, I didn't book a table. I didn't invite anyone. I went to a beachside cabin for the weekend with someone who actually cared. We drank wine, grilled steaks, and watched the sun dip behind the waves in silence. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel guilty for celebrating myself. I didn't feel selfish. I felt free. So yeah, that was the year I lost my family and found myself. And I'd make that trade again in a heartbeat.